this is, and of course it was from outside, so I noticed all that, you know.
Welcome, everybody. Tonight is Monday, June 27th, 2022, and I am calling this meeting to order. The Orange County Schools Board of Education pledges to our families, students, staff, and the greater community to conduct our business in a courteous and productive manner, showing respect for fellow board members, staff, and citizens. The board asks its citizens to conduct themselves with the same courtesy towards all staff members and each other. As per board policy, Robert's Rules of Order will be used to conduct meetings. Following the Pledge of Allegiance, a moment of silence will be observed before we begin our business. Public comment will be held after the board adopts tonight's agenda. The board also asks that you check your cell phones and other electronic devices to be sure that they are turned off or on vibrate in order to avoid disruptions during the meeting. And if you would, please stand and join me for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
As we begin our work this evening, I would like to recognize that Orange County Schools was established on land previously settled by the ancestors of the Occaneechi Band of the Saponi Nation. This board has made a commitment to honor and respect the heritage of Indigenous and all members of our OCS community, to work to undo decades of racial harm, and to build to the best of our ability a community that fosters a sense of belonging for all of our students so that they may thrive and succeed. Please join me now for a moment of silence. Thank you. And now it is time for our recognitions. And Dr. Felder, I believe you are doing the first recognition tonight.
Indeed, I am, and I'm going to ask Mr. Patrick Abley, Deputy Superintendent of Operations, to join me. So again, good evening, Chair Doyle, Vice Chair Stevens, to the full board, students, families, and community members tonight. We want to recognize Bobby Barwick Jr., who unfortunately will not be able to join us virtually. Bobby is a former Orange County Schools student. Since graduating, he continues to support the district's operations team by providing daily weather updates. And so we want to recognize him tonight. And Mr. Abley and Ms. Katina are here to do just that. So I'm going to turn the floor over to them.
All right, good evening. Thank you, Dr. Felder, Board of Education members, and our public listening as well. We want to say a special recognition tonight to Mr. Bobby Barwick. Over 8 years ago, Bobby had the opportunity as an OCS student to spend some time in the transportation department. And he has stayed in contact with the department almost on a daily basis ever since. Most folks know in the operations department, we have a team of individuals from transportation, maintenance, and our safety and security division who are constantly monitoring the weather, checking in with law enforcement, the Department of Transportation on road conditions, emergency management, and the National Weather Service, sometimes as early as 4 a.m., and we finish very late into the evening. But what you don't know is we have our very own weather spotter in Orange County by the name of Bobby Barwick. He calls into the transportation department, gives us an update on weather reports in the morning, and does so every afternoon. He wants to make sure that our bus drivers are safe, and a weather announcement goes out broadcasting his weather reports so that individuals know exactly what the weather conditions are as being seen in the county. He also has made sure that we know he's always available, and we just do truly appreciate his hard work and dedication. And so we have a certificate of appreciation that will be presented to Bobby in recognition of 8 years of volunteer service to the transportation department, students and staff by reporting weather conditions for the Orange County schools, and it's signed by none other than Dr. Felder, and we appreciate Bobby's continued service And also what Bobby doesn't know is on behalf of the operations team, we have a few associated items for him that he'll also be presented with, which is a windproof umbrella and his very own weather safety jacket as well. So Bobby, we thank you. And sorry you couldn't be here with us this evening, but we'll be out to see you and pass these things along. And again, we thank you for your dedication to keeping us safe in Orange County schools. Thank you. Let's give him a round of applause.
Thank you so much, Mr. Barwick. That is really wonderful. Well, tonight is also a special evening. We are also recognizing two of our board members who are retiring from Orange County Schools Board of Education service. And so this is a bittersweet night. And so first we would like to recognize Ms. Hillary McKenzie. And so just to start us off, Hillary, we appreciate so much your community advocacy for equity that preceded your time on the board, and all your labor to help advocate for and create policies around racial equity and gender support guidelines for our district. And it's made a really huge impact for all of our students, staff, and community. And I would like to just express how much I appreciate your leadership as chair. Just the fact that it was during a pandemic we had never experienced before just added a few more wrinkles to that. But your leadership and your spirit of collaboration and your mentorship for those of us like myself who are new to the board, I really appreciate the example of service that you have set for all of us. And I know that you will continue to be an equally fierce and loving advocate for equity as you go out from here tonight. And before I turn it over to you, I know that Sarah has some comments she would like to make.
Thank you, Carrie. Thank you. It has been a pleasure to spend the past 4 years on this board with you. In addition to the policies that Chair Doyle mentioned, I'd also say the dress code, the improvements in the dress code, which I saw recently. Durham is making some very similar changes to their dress code. I think in the policy space in particular, there are other school districts that are looking at what we've done, and that's mostly thanks to your leadership of a lot of those policies. I think you've done a tremendous amount to bring focus in this district to a greater sense of belonging for all students. And it's a real lasting legacy. And so it's been a pleasure, and thank you for chairing the board during an unprecedented pandemic. Your level of responsiveness, particularly knowing the range of responses that you have received, I think is your courage in that, I think is really admirable. So I want to thank you for that.
Thank you, Sarah. Okay. So when I reflect on my time serving on this board, I'm so proud of the progress that has been made in the last 4 years. The ability and willingness of our district to address tough topics in a transparent way has grown. Our student data are being disaggregated by subgroup and openly discussed on this district, school, classroom, and then individual levels through improved PLCs and MTSS. And our literacy strategies have improved in truly meaningful ways that will change the lives of our students in the years ahead. 4 years ago, we requested board meetings to be live streamed, and we expanded public comment. That was some of the first stuff that our board did. We required all district communications to be translated into multiple languages and have since created a formal communication to all stakeholders that summarizes each board meeting. Culture shifting policies like equity in education and gender support guidelines have offered expanded protections to our students and staff members, as well as updates to our discrimination policy and dress code. We have worked to build trust with our Indigenous community. We have affirmed that Black Lives Matter, created affinity, parent, and employee groups, hired bilingual family liaisons, celebrated Pride Month for the first time ever in this district. We made Juneteenth a paid holiday for OCS employees months ahead of that decision by the federal government. We wrote and implemented a lactation support policy, and this board has been more engaged in the community than any previous iteration, I believe. We have navigated impossible decisions about COVID closings and reopenings, asynchronous learning strategies, masking, air purifiers, and so many things that none of us ever dreamed would be part of this gig when we decided to run for the school board. While the last 4 years have felt like many, many more than that, I am confident that the progress we made as a district matches more closely the years that it felt like rather than the actual time elapsed. And for that, I'm really proud of our group. There are lots of people I would like to thank tonight. Vice Chair Stevens, Brenda, your service is a gift to this community, and I want to express special gratitude for your many years of service. I can't look at you while I'm doing this. I wasn't sure the first time that we met at Cup of Joe what our working relationship was going to be like moving forward, but we have always been a strong team. Your experience guided our very young board 4 years ago, and you have been an incredible advocate for the children of this district locally, countywide, and especially at the state level. Not every board has the privilege of having the president of the North Carolina School Boards Association as a sitting member, and you were in that role during such a key time. You have challenged me to grow both as a board member and as a person, and we managed to have a little bit of fun too. You are a pioneer, a survivor, and a wealth of knowledge and insight. Fellow board members, I also want to thank each of you for the gifts that you have brought to this board and for your incredibly hard work that I have had the honor of seeing up close. It has been inspiring to feel the voices of our community through you, and I have truly learned and grown from each one of you in a unique way. I don't think most people fully understand the level of commitment and time and sacrifice that this role requires, and I am appreciative of the heart that you bring to this role. And though we have not always agreed on everything, I admire each of you truly for your convictions and your dedication to this work. Okay, I'm gonna cry like after each person I address, so hold on. Dr. Felder, I want to thank you for choosing to come to OCS and for bringing the highest level of excellence and professionalism here. I was honored to work closely with you during my time as chair, and I will take your example with me for the rest of my life. Your passion for education, your conviction to serving every child, and your openness to see and honor the humanity in everyone is an example for all of us. Let me get it together now. I knew I was gonna cry, I'm a crier. Most of y'all know that already, so this is only surprising to a few of you. Okay, there are too many staff members to start naming everyone who has touched my experience and my heart, but please know that my appreciation for educators and staff members has never been higher, from our nurses, counselors, social workers, to central services, to technology, child nutrition, after-school transportation, custodial staff, teacher assistants, media specialists, family liaisons, coaches, and every single person who helps create the heartbeat of this district. Thank you for sharing your stories with me and your experience, and for the trust that you have placed in me through the years. I could not have done this job without the unyielding support and love from my husband, Mike, our family, and our friends. Thank you for believing in me, standing by me, and encouraging me when things got occasionally a little bit rocky. And a very special thank you to LaTondra Strong, who changed the direction of my life all those years ago. It has been a tremendous honor to serve in this role, and I wish huge success to the newly elected board. There is much work yet to be done, and I will be rooting for all 7 of you. And I promise that I'll come back as a parent for public comment once in a while.
Yeah. All right.
Round of applause for Ms. McGuire.
Picture of this.
At least $10.
A picture.
We'd like to present you with some woodworkmanship from students at Cedar Ridge High School, recognizing your years of service to Orange County Schools.
Thank you so much.
Okay, so we would also like to recognize Vice Chair and former Chair Brenda Stevens tonight, and trying to recount Brenda's legacy in this district and county is hard, so I hope I don't leave anything out. But this product of Orange County is a veteran. She was invited to West Point. She has served in the county for over 40 years. She has been a library director for many years. She was the first African-American woman to serve as library director in the state of North Carolina.
Mayor Mcguire.
Let's see, can I get some of these things wrong? She has been very active in her 20 years serving on the Orange County School Board, working around the state and learning from people in other districts and helping our district maintain relationships. She has served on the North Carolina School Board Association, including as president during the pandemic, and was recognized as the pandemic president. She received the Raleigh Dingman Award for outstanding service. She has been the local school board advisor to the North Carolina State Board of Education. And personally, Brenda, you set a high example of how to be in public service. You're incredibly hard to keep up with and to pattern yourself after. And I know retirement is not going to be a downshift for you. I know you're going to continue serving people in this county. Brenda is someone who comes home from 4 straight graduations and goes and organizes trash pickup along the highway.
At 8 a.m. the next day.
And so I thank you for your example of service and of leadership and of encouraging those who are coming behind you, as you have encouraged me.
Well,
Say a couple words before
Yes,
you
you
do. Okay, it's just a couple, I promise. Brenda, you are, just a couple of things. I mean, Carrie mentioned a lot of these things already. You are consummately prepared. You are the most prepared every time. You are an incredible wealth of knowledge about this school district and the history of why things are the way they are. You're a wealth of knowledge about the role of a school board, the unique role, different than a superintendent, different than the other jobs, and like how we should do our job. Because of all this learning you've done around the state and all the people that you've gotten to know and just all the ways that you've gotten to see it, you know, your leadership at the state level, I mean, that Raleigh Dingman Award was well earned. You have, this is a little math, by my calculation, you have worked with at least 27 different board member colleagues. And you have helped keep this district steady through the transitions of 11 different superintendents.
yeah.
You have stuck with this job through
I counted them.
a lot of different hard times, and controversial times. And, you know, you've done it every time with concern about doing right by our students and our staff members. And just personally, I've learned so much from you. I'm really going to miss you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much. Well, you all know I don't relish long meetings. So with that said, I am not going to talk as much as Hillary. I could, because I have 20 years worth that I could fill in, but I'm not going to do that. I will say that I am incredibly grateful for having had a chance to work alongside all of you. I wish all of you the best You know I'm going to stay in touch. But I want to say that although my time for serving on the Board of Education is ending, it is not the end of my service in this county or in this state. My life's work involves helping to build and strengthen cohesive communities. So how can I place a time limit on what I was created to do? Because I know I was created to help people. So rather, this season of service transitions with a comma, not a period. I will continue to pursue my service work from a different vantage point. Wonder what that will be. As long as I have the strength and energy to keep going, I'm going to keep going. And I, along with Hillary, I'm going to be at the meetings, especially one that's coming in October, a commissioners meeting. So I will continue to see you all, and I will be around because I know Dr. Felder might need my help. So thank you all for everything, and I have enjoyed it. I don't know what I'm going to do twice a week. My husband will love seeing me at home, I guess, because he says I'm never there, but whatever. And thanks a lot for my family for coming out. Usually the only time they come out is when I'm getting sworn in, and so they're coming out, Hillary said, because I'm getting sworn out. So thank you all, Seth, Sarah, and Greg, for coming in and supporting me. Let's step together here.
So Brenda, you're also receiving recognition of your 20 years of service.
Thank you.
And an extra special dose for your extra
I
special
love
years
that.
of service.
Thank you. This man knows me. He just said, this is very pink and green for you. So those are my sorority colors. That's why I was out at 8 o'clock in the morning cleaning up the highway.
That's why you get flowers.
So that's why I get flowers. Thank you. I'm going to put them here. Thank you all so much.
Oh, they smell good. Leave them here.
I will. Oh, perfect. It's for you, Bobby. Thanks a lot. So y'all can go home. Thank you.
No, wait. Hold on, just 1 second, Stevens family. I think before we move on from recognitions, I think Dr. Felder would like the chance to say a few words.
Indeed, I do, and thank you, Chair Doyle. So children need champions, and we have certainly had, and I'm sure we'll continue to have, based on what they shared tonight, too, and Mrs. Stevens and Mrs. McKenzie. So I want to personally thank Mrs. Stevens for her 20 years of service, and Mrs. McKenzie for her 4 years of service to the children of Orange County Schools. Both of these board members, through their unselfish and dedicated service, have been strong advocates for children. You know, they're not just champions for children, they're gladiators for children. And I am most grateful to both of you, and I wish both of you nothing but the best in your future endeavors. So it's been an honor to serve the children with both of you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And it was an honor to help hire you.
Oh, well, thank you.
Hey, thank you. Thanks. 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 Thank you.
Everybody, and thank you to the Cedar Ridge High
Oh,
School
this
students
is-
for these beautiful recognition of
Yeah.
meritorious service.
This is lovely. Our students did this.
They did. We have talented students.
Oops.
Right.
All right.
So, without further ado, it is time to adopt tonight's agenda, and I
They could
believe
take the
that,
flowers home.
Sarah, you have a request. Hold on, Greg. Sorry. y'all.
So I'd like to move to
okay, I know that. I'm leaving.
adopt tonight's agenda with one addition, which is a discussion of the teacher supplement, the years of service teacher supplement, fix that we've talked about in budgeting.
Okay. So that's a motion by Sarah and a second by Bonnie. Do we need to separately vote in a, adopting this amendment to the agenda?
I think, so no, the motion was to adopt this agenda with that addition.
Right,
So
okay,
you
gotcha.
can-
Okay, so a motion from Ms. Smiley, a second from Ms. Hauser, all in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Great, thank you. Okay, now is time for public comments. After each speaker has been recognized, they will have 3 minutes to speak. The board will not have a discussion with any speaker. No profane or vulgar language will be permitted, nor personal abuse against any person. Any speaker that uses threatening language will not be permitted to continue. Public comment should not address any specific confidential student or personnel matter. Complaints concerning any specific employee or students are not permissible during public comments, and the speakers must conclude their remarks at the end of their 3 minutes. And I believe we only have one person signed up for public comment tonight, and that is Daryl Mcguire. There she is. Welcome, Ms. Mcguire.
Good evening, Dr. Felder, members of the Orange County Board of Education. My name is Daryl Mcguire, co-founder of Orange Community Players, retired Orange County educator, a very strong community-minded person, volunteering in many endeavors for many years of my life in this community, which I call home. I received a delayed response to the request for Orange Community Players to use Orange High Auditorium, the shop and the drama room for the staging and production of our summer musical, Beauty and the Beast. Since that email, I'll be honest with you, I have been in total shock. According to that email, Orange Community Players charges to use the facilities will be over $7,000, not counting the cost of secured personnel for any technical staff that the system may require. We are now booked with Orange High School, and we must go forward with that production. Since the dates have been set, our royalties have been paid, rehearsals are in full swing, space being donated, of course, sets are under construction, everything being donated, that space, and all the other areas of production, including rehearsals, all of this being donated by our community people. Orange Community Players was started as a true community organization over 17 years ago to offer an opportunity for residents to participate and enjoy professionally staged productions. Orange County Schools quickly became one of our major supporters, offering the facilities for our summer productions. Those are not the only productions that we do. We work wonderfully with all of the different phases of Orange County, everything from the Ghost in October to Burwell School to volunteering and working in the schools with the children, whatever might be there, and we can help. The summer production has always served as an extension to all the arts departments of our schools, offering students another venue to fine-tune, express, demonstrate, and show their talents many times that they didn't realize they had. The school system viewed this as a win-win education, educating students and building strong community relations. School leaders valued the importance of Orange Community's efforts and worked with us in providing that space for this wonderful community tradition. Our technicians are and have been qualified for all the past school graduates. Many of them are Orange County graduates, majoring in theater, IT, land, light and sound production, RTVMP. These people are now Orange County teachers, retired teachers, business owners, and Orange County taxpayers who volunteer their talents for this organization. Many times over the
Mcguire,
years.
I'm sorry, we're at the end of your 3 minutes. Could you wrap up, please?
Yes. We are a 501c3 nonprofit, truly community organization. I have no other choice but to request whatever type of waiver is needed to allow Orange County Players to continue the use of these facilities that we have in the past. Without doing this, we are bankrupt. Thank you for your time and responding to our plea for support.
Thank you, Ms. Mcguire. And I'd like to remind anyone that written public comments can be submitted until midnight. They get included with our minutes. Okay, that concludes our public comment this evening. And so now we are moving on to our consent agenda. And I know there are a couple items that board members would like pulled from consent, but I'm just going to read through these. There are 16 in total. And so there are several that I think we're going to pull out for our regular meeting time. So there's the minutes from June 14th, our personnel report, our student insurance for the school year, our budget amendments from this closing school year, authorization for superintendent to approve necessary actions over summer break, school year 23 payroll calendars, fiscal year 23 budget resolution, interim approval, interim appropriation budget approval, and then there are, I believe, 2 of our policy updates, second readings that have been requested to be pulled for discussion action, policy 8100 and 5030. Is that correct, Bonnie and Will? Okay. And then facility usage fees for school year 23, Will?
Yes.
Okay, and contract approval for fire alarm systems is another item in our consent agenda, also updated Tharrington Smith contract, school resource officer 3-year contract extension with Orange County Sheriff's Department. Sarah, you're pulling that? Okay. And then, let's see, our final 4 items, child nutrition summer feeding update, honors math course, purchase authorization for new school visitor and check-in management system, and purchase of athletic field equipment, which is mowers. So there are 3 items that we can discuss momentarily when we're going to do those, but do I have a motion to adopt tonight's revised consent agenda?
So moved.
Second.
Motion from Mr. Atherton and a second from Ms. Smiley. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, Dr. Felder, do you have an opinion? So we have 2 policies to discuss, as well as the facility usage fees, and then the school resource officer. We have all discussion action items tonight. Do you want to put them at the beginning or the end?
And please.
At the end.
That would be
So
like
we will
I'm sorry, items G, H and I.
Yes.
Let me see.
Oh, you want to make it item G? Is that what you said?
Mhm.
Make it item G, okay.
Oh, okay, I'm with you.
Okay.
Yes, I'm sorry. I
All right,
meant
yeah,
we will
we
add
got
them
it.
as.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
And then we'd
We were
also
looking
add
for
the
G.
supplement discussion.
Yes, and then Dr. Felder, discussing the teacher supplement that Ms. Smiley mentioned
Yes.
at the end? Do you think? Think of it fits.
It could be at the end. I think the sooner we can have that discussion, the better. So my preference would be sooner versus later.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, we have Ms. Graff coming up for the first 2 discussion action items. Perhaps we can do it after those 2? Does that make sense? Is that okay with everybody? All right. So I will pass to you, Dr. Felder, to take us through our items here. I believe Ms. Rath and Mr. Abele are coming up.
Sure. So the first discussion action item would be, let's see what we have here, child nutrition services pay scales, an additional supplement for managers. And so joining us will be Mrs. Rhonda Rath, our Chief Finance Officer, Mr. Patrick Abele, Deputy Superintendent Operations, and I believe Sarah Pitts, Director of Child Nutrition Services.
All right, thank you. Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
We are back before you this evening to talk about child nutrition. When we had talked about the classified pay scales in April, child nutrition was not part of that discussion because they are funded from a different source. We wanted the ability to take a look at this enterprise fund to make sure that the cost of meals to our students and families would not be impacted. And we also wanted time to see bids that were coming in for food and other items for the upcoming school year, as well as being in a better position to know what federal reimbursements are going to look like for next school year. I believe bids are still out and still coming in. We don't have finalization on our federal reimbursements at this time. However, we do want to come back before you to recommend that we place our child nutrition assistants and our child nutrition managers on the classified pay scale for a 55 for the assistants and a 58 for the manager. These would be the new pay scales that were recommended from the Hill Group, only with a 0.3% step increase for each year of experience. That equates to approximately $17,000 annually to implement that. We recommend that this implementation be effective on July 1st. I'll talk about, well, I'll go ahead and go there now. This is roughly going to impact 40 staff members. 29 of those are child nutrition assistants and 11 are child nutrition managers. These are all individuals that are in our schools. This does not impact any child nutrition substitutes, and any district level staff were already encompassed in the classified increases back in April that were approved. They are already on those pay scales. So any questions before I move to our next item?
Board members, Will?
I just wanted to say thank you for all the time you've put into this. It's definitely been a good thing for this district. These nutrition staff know every student, they know every number, they know what's going on in their family, and I'm proud we're going to do this tonight. Thank you.
Were we also going to talk about the additional supplement?
Mhm.
Okay, great.
Also, as a component of this, when we were looking at it, it became very apparent that there is not a very large difference in the hourly rate between an assistant and a manager. And as a result, it does create challenges when you're trying to recruit individuals to step into those manager positions. It's approximately 50 cents an hour is the difference. So as a result, we would like to recommend that we consider an additional supplement for our child nutrition managers based upon their years of experience. The tiers are 0 to 10 years would get an additional $250 a month. 10 to 20 years would get an additional $350 a month. And 20 plus years would get an additional $450 a month.
Questions for Ms. Rath on that? Brenda and then Bonnie.
I just want to clarify, because we've talked about this before in closed session, the years of service, it doesn't matter if they worked in nutrition, say in Alamance or Durham, just the years of service, period, not specifically Orange County.
Yes, ma'am.
Great.
Bonnie?
I first want to really thank you for adding the child nutrition people into the tent, if you will. I have a question about the hourly rate and the supplement. So there seems to be a huge difference. So the child nutrition people will be getting an average of $350 a year, and if we go with the supplement, the managers will be getting an average of $3,000 a year. So I'm just curious why we did that, and adding to that, and we're looking at some other grades at regrading them. Is the 55 and the 58 the right grades? I don't know what that compares to. So I'm just curious as to why this huge difference between what we're giving the managers and what we're giving the staff.
Okay. Well, it seems like that was the point you were making, that there wasn't much of a bump to become a manager.
Yeah, there's not much of a difference between the hourly rate, even when they're placed on the new scale, between an assistant and a manager. And
Yes.
therefore, that's why we were making the recommendation for the additional supplement.
If I could add, that was also causing difficulty in recruiting to be managers.
I heard all that. I guess I'm asking a slightly different, it's a huge difference. So we have the employees are getting are we fully staffed on the employees? So we're having trouble recruiting the assistants as well.
No, we're not currently staffed at this point. Right now, we are short one 6-hour full-time staff member. We have a 5-hour position that's open, and we have multiple 3-hour positions that are open. So we're sitting about 85% staffed at this point.
Okay, that's not, and how about the managers? What is the?
We are currently down 1 manager. So we're hoping to make that recommendation soon because we've done the interview process, but we're currently just short 1.
Okay, so the essence of my question, and I realize there should be a difference, but we're offering a small increase to the assistants and a very large, 10 times increase to the managers. And I just wondered if there was, something in the, should we be offering more to the employees and a little less? I just don't know. It just seems like a very big difference.
So I also think one of the items we looked at was we have recently implemented a very similar scale for our lead custodians or head custodians, facility managers in the building. When we look at the responsibilities of a child nutrition manager, also supervising staff evaluations, and we also encompass the nutritional standards, dietary plans that they have to monitor, ensure that we have commodities and goods, which have been very difficult to track and record. Looking at the skills and looking at the responsibilities, we do think it's commensurate with the position of a lead manager. Also considering that our child nutrition managers, and most times before we make inclement weather calls at 5:15 a.m. are already in the building or on their way into the building. They start their days very early. And they also respond not only to our needs, but whenever we have emergency shelters and we have to open up our kitchens, they're also the ones who assist with that. So there's I think a level of responsibility that goes with a manager beyond just the time they're at the serving line and ensuring that meals are flowing while students are coming through the cafeteria, that we do feel the pay scale for this extra additional stipend is justified. To your point about the other classified or the line workers and their pay scale and salary ranges, that is being addressed with the additional the other parts and components that were recommended. But the other reason, certainly we're not recommending more at this point in time. It's just because we still have some unknowns with bids still coming in and where we are right now with our funding program as an enterprise program. So we did want to recognize the managers and the difficulty for the level of responsibility.
Appreciate that. Thank you.
I know Will had a question and then Sarah.
Well, it was more of a comment that the whole reason for the supplement was that the managers were making about the same with this huge amount of responsibility to incent our supervisors and all the hard work they're doing to get compensated for that. So I definitely support that. I've seen what they do. It's amazing.
I just wanted clarification on 2 things. 1, how many hours a week do the managers work? And then 2, I just want to figure out what the equivalent of the 250 or 350 is to X cents per hour or whatever. And then what is the funding source for that piece? It seemed like the 0.3% is sustained in the enterprise fund, but what is the funding source for this?
So the funding source for the additional supplement will be like all of our other supplements. It will be out of our local budget, and it will come out of the $631,000 that was originally, we refer to it as the online sales tax revenue that we received this fiscal year that we're currently in, that is recurring but is included in the per pupil funding for next year, but it is within the 631,000.
So addressing the classified salary study, essentially,
Yes.
it's covered in that.
Yes.
sense. Okay.
Okay.
Oh, sorry, and so how many hours do they work?
Our managers currently work 40 hours.
Okay. Any further discussion?
Motion to approve?
Second.
For Mr. Atherton and a second for Ms. McKenzie. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Great. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for your work on this.
Thank you. Okay, the next item that we want to bring before you this evening is our insurances. And Eva, do you want to kick us off?
Sure, this is just a renewal of your annual liability coverage, and it's not on consent because Ms. Stevens has to recuse herself as
Right,
a board
I was
member.
about to say that I'm recusing myself from this because I am the chair of the North Carolina School Boards Trust, and we sent those out, so I'll take this chance to powder my nose. So,
Don't go too far.
Otherwise, it is a routine renewal.
Yes, it is a routine renewal. Each of them are with the North Carolina School Boards Trust. There are the errors and omissions in the general liability saw a slight increase. The automobile, there was a slight decrease. And of course, workers' compensation is based upon your payroll. So that was roughly a 13% increase that we see in our workers' compensation.
I'll motion to approve.
Second?
A motion from Ms. Smiley and a second from Ms. Hauser. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? So that passed 5-0 with Ms. Stevens recusing herself. Okay. Yes, hopefully she can come back quickly here. So I believe, Dr. Felder, now we're going to begin the conversation around teacher supplements.
Yes, and I would invite Mrs. Rapp
Yes.
to remain.
Can somebody go get Ms. Stevens? Oh, okay.
Yeah.
All right, all right.
So thank you very much. We were, by the time you were in the hallway, we were done.
One time you decided to do something fast.
Could I just preface more about why? Okay, so in terms of adding this item to the agenda, so in our many budget discussions, we have talked about the fact that the teacher supplement only is queued to your years of service in Orange County schools, which is not helpful for us recruiting veteran teachers from other school districts. And so that was part of our budget request to the county commissioners. It is absolutely one of the things that we're interested in fixing as a board. And in our last discussion in the budget committee meeting, the consensus was there are many unknowns about our budget, including whether the state will add additional increases, which will be unfunded, that we will need to find money for, and a wide variety of other potential costs. And so we weren't at that point thinking we should bring this. And at this point in the year, it's like peak recruiting and retaining our teachers season. And so if we intend to do this, and we don't have another like full board meeting until August. And so I just wanted to raise the question, and Bonnie had raised the question over email as well, whether we should consider going ahead and approving that, like making that fix now, even though we still do have all of that uncertainty. So I just wanted to open it up for discussion, given the timing.
Okay, and so I'm sure lots of people have things to say, so if we can just remember to take turns. Who would like to go? Will?
So I'm definitely in support of fixing the years of experience, and we discussed in the budget committee the 2%, which I think we got ballpark of 572K. That included benefits and retirement if we added that as well, which would be on top of that. So the 12% would go to 15 for each tier.
Do we have a number for that?
We do. It was 572K is what we were given to add 2% to each tier.
$572,000? Okay.
And Carrie, if I could just add a little bit more. So what I'm really, the reason I brought this is I'm really interested in what staff think about Dr. Felder thinks, Rhonda thinks. We had that whole discussion, but at this point with teacher recruitment, is what you all think about this. I mean, the board should have a discussion too, but
Thank you so much,
Thank you, Sarah.
Mrs. Smiley. I am 100% in support of now versus later for all the reasons that have been mentioned.
Yeah, that's great.
Strongly support this.
Further comments from Ms. Rath and staff before we go back to board members?
If I could also just
Yes,
add,
ma'am.
because I think I'm channeling Rhonda July 1st. I knew it.
Yes.
I just want to say a few numbers and just say a few unknowns. So right now, the increase over our continuation budget was roughly 3.1 million. We've committed to the 631,500 for the classified salary increases and the additional supplements for child nutrition staff. We know the biennium budget has a 2.5% increase, which we've seen today. They're telling us there's going to be a budget tomorrow. We know that we have 1.1 million of that we also need to protect, for lack of a better term. So that leaves us roughly 1.4 million that is unallocated. That's the budget increase that we have yet to prioritize for an expansion budget item. If we, and I support the 651,000 to put our current certified staff on the supplement that is equivalent to their years of experience in the profession, not in Orange County schools. That's estimated to be around $651,000. That brings us down to roughly 770,000 is all that we would have remaining as expansion item request. I'm a little hesitant with the supplement increases only because of the unknown cost increases that we're seeing with all of the bids and the contracts that we have out that are coming in, as well as not knowing if the House and the Senate have reached a negotiation that's higher than 2.5%. So the funding that we got from the commissioners was based upon a 2.5% increase. If they come in higher, which, we're hopeful that they do, but what that then means is we have 775,000 to work with. If that doesn't meet it, then that means we're going to have to cut in other places or either allocate fund balance.
Okay. Will, Bonnie, Sarah.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, or go back to the commissioners.
Wow.
Yeah, and I'm
Please do.
really grateful that we're talking about this. I would love to move forward with the fix to the supplement. I am very interested in the increase, but I would like to wait to discuss that as we discuss the entire budget, which we haven't done yet. But I think I would be in favor of pushing the supplement fix through and holding the rest to discuss about with all the other priorities that we have to face with the district.
Yep, I agree with that. And I was just doing the math on if the state adds another 2.5% increase, for example, that eats 550 of the $770,000. So I'm glad we may know more about that real soon, but I'm supportive of making this change just to the fix of the supplement now.
Okay, Will?
So just for clarity of what y'all mean by supplement, so there is a years of experience, and then there is the supplement, which is the percentage I'm trying to figure out which one y'all are talking
Yes.
about.
Years of experience.
So years of
In the
experience.
district versus in the, Ms. Rath, I think it was in the state versus in the profession. Can you clarify which the calculation was based on?
For, in the state of North Carolina, so it would be on their license, whatever years of service that they have credited on their license would what we would adjust this to.
And just to be clear, this is a fix to the supplement, because our supplement is based on years of experience in the district. Our supplement would be based on years of experience in the state or in your license.
That is correct.
That's a better way. And then we can later look at whether we want to increase the supplement. And we could do that as part of the fuller budget deliberation.
Let me see. Hillary, Brenda, do either of you have comments or no?
Support the supplement.
Will?
Support.
So just one question for the superintendent. Which is your preference?
Right.
Is it years of experience or changing our lower tiers from 12% to 15%? Because really what we've been told, you can do one of them, right, based on what we have. Which one would be the most impactful for you?
That's tough. I would say the supplement based on years of experience.
Okay.
That's the one I, would think would be the most impactful. Rhonda, would you agree with that choice? Sure. Joyce is in
I would look
agreement.
to human capital. I think when we look at changing, giving credit for your years of service in North Carolina on your license as a teacher, it's going to really be more impactful to our teachers that have more years of service. And it will also allow us to be able to recruit and retain teachers who have more years in the profession.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you.
So,
And when will
go ahead, Hillary.
paychecks reflect this? Because that's what we're going to all get 10,000 emails about tonight.
July 1st.
Thank you.
Right.
Okay, just making sure
In
that
our
was
fiscal
clear for
year,
everyone.
In a few days.
In a few days, and so this would go into effect with their first paycheck, which most of our 10-month staff will not be, they're not working other than they're working on temporary terminating contracts through the summer, which this does not come into play. But their first paycheck in August, when they return to Orange County Schools in the teaching position, that first paycheck in August 31st would have that new supplement.
Thank you so much for the clarity.
So I'll move that we fix the teacher supplements to be based on years of experience on their license rather than years of experience with the district, and effective July 1st, and that we have further discussions about increasing the supplement in our broader budget deliberations. How's that?
Second.
A motion from Ms. Hauser and a second from Mr. Atherton. And Ms. Smiley, did you want to?
Just a clarification question. The years of experience on their license, do teachers shift, elementary school license, middle school, is there anything like that where that would actually not be what we intended? We mean years of experience in North Carolina, so I just want to make sure that phrase is.
I'll let the license experts speak to license.
Good evening. So to answer your question, I'm sorry, good evening, Madam Chair, Dr. Felder. To answer your question, Ms. Smiley, when you have a teaching license, that is your license. So you can add on additional areas to your license. So for example, which she doesn't, but I'm gonna use her as an example. If Ms. Raff has 12 years of experience on her license, and she comes to us from, let's say, another school district, we are now being able to give her credit for what is on her teaching license. So I'm hoping I'm answering your
There's
question.
not different types of licenses where someone switches one to another or something. It's just.
Because you said that's like adding on, like if she had
That's
her
adding on.
original
We're
license
gonna
as
get
an
credit
elementary
for
school
all
teacher,
those
then she did
years.
additional training and.
That's an add-on. So for example, you could be a regular teacher and decide you may want to do an AIG certification, or you may want to do whatever. Your years of experience is your years of experience.
Great, thank you. Okay, so we have a motion that's been seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Wonderful.
Great.
Okay, and then, let's see, did we move another item here, Dr. Fuller?
Great.
All right.
I really appreciate, while you're looking, I really appreciate the fact that you're coming, you know you're next up, and you're coming, and that's the way it's supposed to be. We shouldn't have to sit there and wait for somebody to meander across the room. Thank you.
You're welcome, thank you.
You've been taught well.
And so the person coming before us is Ms. Kimberly DeGraffenreid. She is the new 504 SEL coordinator and has held the position of school counselor and lead school counselor for the district for a number of years. And so tonight she's going to share with the board, bring an update with regards to where the district has landed in the identification of a social emotional learning curriculum. This was brought to the board previously in terms of the selection process, and we were to come back once a decision has been made. And so Ms. DeGraffenreid is going to bring that decision to the board as funding approval for funding to purchase the curriculum is needed tonight. So Ms. DeGraffenreid.
Thank you, Dr. Felder.
You're so welcome.
Thank you, board members. Good evening. I am Kimberly DeGraffenreid, your new 504 SEL coordinator, and I am here on behalf of Dr. Drea, who could not be here this evening, so I was more than happy to step in to discuss the core SEL learning curriculum and the proposals. So as you know, excuse me, SEL is a part of our multi-tiered system of support. Coming from the counseling background, I personally believe it is one of the most important components of the multi-tiered systems of support. Because if we cannot meet those needs of the children on their social emotional level, it's hard to reach them and help them to grow academically. Social and emotional learning is the process through which all young people and adults acquire and apply knowledge, skills, attitudes, and develop healthy identities, manage emotions, and achieve personal and collective goals, feel and show empathy for others, sorry, I don't have my glasses, establish and maintain supportive relationships, and make responsible and caring decisions. On the April 24th, 25th board meeting, when we were talking about the restructure of the Student Support Services Department, we did bring about this quote from Forbes, where Forbes talks about how powerful SEL is in getting our students ready under the college and career readiness so that they can be they could enter the economic workforce with those desired skills and be social and emotionally sound in order to integrate into our society and have future economic opportunities. In our selection process, the SEL curriculum selection team looked at 9 different areas that we wanted to cover in order to select the best SEL curriculum for Orange County schools. We looked at establishing the selection criteria, using the criteria to identify aligned curriculum, host curriculum presentations for stakeholders groups, send curriculum to schools for evaluation by educators, use evaluation scores to make recommendations to the Cabinet and Board of Education, align this curriculum with the North Carolina Standard Course of Study, create implementation plan with stakeholders, identify fidelity measures, and deploy curriculum and continuously improve implementation. The first criteria was to establish the selection criteria. And so the team met from January to March to talk about what were the key elements that we would like in a SEL curriculum. Once the team established what those elements were shared with counselors, teachers, other community members, and definitely parents to review and to give feedback. In looking at our selection criteria, we definitely looked at the following elements of alignment, effective and efficient preparation for educators, that is fully adaptable materials to all of our student groups. It is embedded in classroom procedures. It facilitates and fosters equitable classroom relationships, processes, and results. Cohesive and developmentally appropriate, supports growth and development of social and emotional skills, that it can be conducted in person, hybrid, or remote instruction, and it facilitates the assessment for continuous improvement. So once the criteria has been selected, we're currently looking to make sure that it aligns, that the presentations from the curriculum specialists were ones that we could look at and actually gain information from, and to send the curriculum to schools for evaluation by educators. So through those requests for approval, we have done that process, and we've received feedback from counselors, teachers at all, and other community members at all three levels. Also in the criteria, the use of evaluation scores to make the recommendations to the Cabinet and Board of Education. We have collected that data. We have that data here to share with you all today. And that shows why we are making the recommendation for the curriculum in which we are. So if you see here, we have the ranking of each curriculum position. There were 5 curriculums that we reviewed. And then there's also the ranking of each curriculum grade span. So looking at this data, we see that there were some curriculums that rated higher with elementary, some that rated higher with middle and high, but there is one particular curriculum that provides what we are looking for across the board, that meets the needs for all 3 grade levels. So the final results of the feedback survey shows that elementary counselors and teachers and advocates really enjoyed the Move This World curriculum for their overall rank. However, middle school really liked Rethink Education, and high school really liked Ripple Effects. However, Rethink Education has all of the aspects that we are looking for an effective SEL curriculum for Orange County schools. And based on the feedback from both the May 5th and June 13th sessions, we would like to recommend Rethink Ed as the SEL curriculum of choice for Orange County schools for pre-K through 12th grade. Our rationale for this recommendation includes the alignment with CASEL competencies, the North Carolina standard course of study, and North Carolina's vision for SEL, and et cetera. The lessons are available and activities are for Tier 1, 2, and 3. There are also adaptive options for those with individual learning needs. The lesson topics have available lessons from grade pre-K through 12. They are level appropriate so that all students can work on the same topics at their age grade appropriate level. The ability to facilitate instruction in multiple formats, i.e. in person, hybrid, and remote, offering in Spanish and English videos, and they are closed captioned. Ongoing support, which is professional development and training for staff, and there's a parent engagement component. The projected cost for Rethink Ed district-wide implementation is $58,400 annually based on our current enrollment of 7,300 students. And the funding source is the ESSER funds. Are there any questions?
I think there are. I know I have questions, and I'm curious what questions board members have. Sarah and then Bonnie.
I have a number of questions, but I think we are doing a thing where we ask one question and then pass it. So let's do that. Could you explain, thank you for the presentation. Could you explain on the feedback survey slide, a couple of slides back,
That one?
yes, yes, ma'am. The numbers across the bottom, is that numbers of people who responded? You know, what's that scale? Is that percentages? What is
That is percentages.
percentages? So that's, can you tell me more about percentages of what? Like, is that the percentage of people who wanted that as their first choice? Is that the percent of people who
There's
thought it
percentages
met
of
the,
respondents.
who thought that, so like Rethink Ed on here, okay? So
Yes.
like the ranking of each curriculum by grade span, the one on the right-hand side.
Yes.
I see like real big differences there between, I think, middle school and elementary school, for example. And so like the elementary school number, when I see it there, it's something under 10. Less than 10% of elementary school, like how would you finish that sentence? You know what I mean?
Less
Like
than
just
10% of elementary school teachers responded to this survey.
oh, it's a response rate to the survey?
Yes, because in seeking feedback for the SEL curriculum, we did have to send out the survey multiple times to get responses so
Okay.
that we could make sure that we've captured everyone's response, everyone had a chance to look at it, and everyone had an opportunity.
Okay. So on both of those two, those are the response rates of those
Yes.
different groups?
Yes.
Can I just ask for clarification for that as well? So does that mean certain number responded for Move This World and a super number, like there were separate surveys for each?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. I know we have more questions. Bonnie?
Yeah, I have several. I'll start with one. On the table that shows the rankings, is one high or one low?
It's one is
You're
low.
not-
Yeah, one is low.
One is low. Okay, I just,
Okay, I have a question. Do you have a question, Brenda? No. Okay. I have a question on the one with the bars that we still have up here. And I can see that there was a lot.
This one?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
To weigh, and I appreciate these graphics because there's a lot of information in there, which is really helpful. So looking sort of like comparatively, it looks like, for example, with Rethink Ed, that was, had the highest favorable response among middle, kind of a strong but middle, favorable response from high school and lower from elementary. So, and then similarly, this on that same slide, but the one to the left, it looks to me, the way I read this, that teachers really liked Move This World. Like the green bar for Move This World was much larger than the green bar for Rethink Ed, whereas there was a flip for counselors. So like, I'm just kind of curious, do you envision this? You know, did you have to think, what will counselors be implementing the most versus what teachers, like does it matter who found which one better to work with because of who's going to be leading the work, or?
Yes and no. We wanted to make sure that we had a curriculum that could cover all grade levels. So one curriculum was very elementary heavy, and you see that based on the results. And so going with that curriculum, we would have lost our middle and high school students because that just did not work for them. In our implementation of the SEL curriculum, it will be universal, meaning that all of our teachers would be the not first responders, sorry. They would be the first ones to actually do those lessons. They would be the ones that would implement them into their classrooms daily. Once a student may need, or student groups may need tier 2 or tier 3, then our counselors would be the ones, counselors and social workers would be the ones that could implement those higher tier interventions.
Thank you.
Sure.
Other questions people might have? Sarah and then Bonnie.
But just clarifying the question that you were asking, I think I had assumed when I saw these bars that was the percentage of people in that group who were favorable to that curriculum, but that's not what this is. This is like response rates to the surveys.
Correct, and their response should also be reflected as favorable.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yes.
Okay. So they took a survey for a certain curriculum only if they liked that curriculum?
Right, they had the option to, if they didn't like the curriculum, they had the option to not take the survey.
Okay.
Or I think there was another avenue in which they can express their dislike. I do not have that data, but if you all would like to see that, I can ask Dr. Dreyer to provide that for you. Or even to provide additional clarification on the data that you have presented here.
I would love that, yeah. Bonnie?
I have a process question.
Okay.
And I know you would count, I don't know, you can count yourself however you want, but it has two parts. One is who was on the evaluation team, and secondly is, does your process include a step where you actually visit schools that are using this and see how their implementation went and how it's working for them?
So when you say the evaluation team, are you meaning the selection committee?
Yep.
At the time, it was Dr. Doyle, myself, Avis Barnes, our lead social worker, multiple teachers and counselors from each school. They were involved in the selection process.
Okay, so
And the second part of your question, refresh my memory again.
the second part is, did you actually talk to people who are using it or even visit people who are using the product?
So we were not able to go out to schools that were using any of the curriculums. I did reach out to some professionals that I know myself about a few of the curriculums to see how it worked or either didn't work in their particular schools and got that feedback.
Oh, go ahead, Sarah.
I mean, other people, if other people have questions, I just do have
I
more
haven't seen
questions.
Will's hand up, so I wasn't sure if he did.
Yeah, no, I'm processing a lot of this, but I do have concerns if we haven't talked to any other district that's
Right.
using this to see their perspective on your top 5 or top 3 to say, what were your challenges, or what did you like, didn't you like, the second, third? Because I'm just concerned that, we did our online academy and we found out later, hey, this wasn't the best pick out of the bunch that we could have used. So I'm just concerned with that.
So thank you,
What's in the back of my
Mr.
mind?
Atherton, for sharing that. I would ask Ms. DeGraffenreid, could you speak more to the outreach to the districts that you just referenced? Which curricula was their outreach to, and how did that play into the final decision?
Sure. I asked about Move This World and Rethink Ed and Ripple Effects. The feedback that I got about Move This World is that it is absolutely excellent for elementary kids because they get to get up and move around and wiggle and so on and so forth. I also received feedback that it was very easy to use. It was, plug and play for teachers. They didn't have to do a lot of prep on the front end. For Rethink Education, I got some very similar feedback, but more so for the middle and high schools, that it was very plug and play. The videos were adaptable to them. The kids related to the information that was in Rethink Education more so than a previous SEL curriculum they had, which was Second Step. And for Ripple Effects, the feedback that I got is that it just wasn't put together as well as they would have liked it to be. They think that there's still some flushing out that they would like to see for Ripple Effects.
May I ask a follow-up question? So how did that information inform the stakeholders? What you just shared with us, was that shared with the group that was working with you?
Yes.
And Dr. Doyle at that time?
Yes.
And now Dr. Dreher, in identifying, which one is it here? Rethink Ed.
Yes.
How did the team land on Rethink Ed?
Well, the information was more teacher, counselor, parent provided. So the team, we didn't necessarily, we took the information that was given from the school-based groups to look at our curricula that we were looking, our criteria that we were looking at for SEL curriculum, and what the teachers, counselors, principals, parents had to say about what the offerings were. And we looked at what ranked highest with them to determine that Rethink Education meets the needs of all of our students.
So which district were you able to reach out to for Rethink Ed?
I contacted Durham. I contacted a previous coworker in Durham. I contacted a previous coworker in person who had used it at another district, not currently in Person County. And I contacted a previous coworker that is in Virginia.
Excellent, thank you.
I just want to say, I really appreciate your presentation and Dr. Felder, your team's presentation, because there's a lot in here, a lot of detail about what, we've had this come up, particularly during COVID and selecting new curriculum. And, we maybe hear some of the positive things, but we haven't heard all the detail of how you've gone through this process. And there's a lot of information in this process. Of course, a lot of information shows us that there's nuance and the decisions are complicated.
Yeah.
But I really appreciate seeing all the different people who participated, the sequence you went through, all the dates, because sometimes we get those questions later, and sometimes in the past we maybe didn't know, how many people from how many schools and how many tiers. And so I appreciate your team for putting all this information in here that led you to the decision that you made. Further questions, Bonnie and then Sarah.
So I'm going to really make you crazy here. The results are so clearly bifurcated, elementary school and secondary school. Is there and the pricing seems to be based on enrollment. Is there a option to get two?
We did discuss that, and that is an option, to have two, one that's more elementary centered and one that's more secondary centered. But we did not present that today because our hope is to have one curriculum all that we can use across the entire district.
Can you speak to why that's important? Why was that important?
Yeah, why is that important?
Yes, that is important. It's much like an academic pacing guide. So if one school is doing one thing and another school is doing something different, how do we know? How can we determine that all of our students are getting the exact same education at the exact same time? So our goal for having one SEL curriculum that covers pre-K through 12 is so that they are covering those topics at the same time of the year. We know that if we're talking about respect, elementary is talking about respect, middle school is talking about respect, and high school is talking about respect all at the same time.
Why is that important?
Well, it's important so that we are aligned in our work, especially on the student services end. We are constantly talking to each other. Hey, you had this student last year. How can I continue to support this student? What's going on? How can I help you in this area? So if the work that we're doing naturally is aligned, having an SEL curriculum helps continue to do that work and keep in alignment. It also helps on the school level so that every teacher in the building knows that everybody's working on respect. And so those lessons continue all throughout the day in every way and aligns with the matrix for every school in terms of PBIS.
I want to thank you for that explanation because that was definitely one of my questions. And I also just want to echo the thought about this. This is a very thorough process that involved a lot of building level staff. So I just really appreciate that. And I just want to make sure that I understand the next slide, the one after this one. So this is there was a June meeting of the teacher representatives from each school. And so those 5s next to Rethink Ed and the 4, that means that a 5 is good, right? That's the highest. That's not the lowest category.
Correct.
That's
the
like
top.
That's our favorite. Okay.
Right.
Okay.
The lowest one.
I just wanted to make sure. Sometimes number 1. Who knows? And with the previous slide, I just wasn't sure how to make sense. Okay. So I'm very supportive. I think it was a very thoughtful process that involved a lot of building level people, and that's really important. So I'm glad to see this. I think the only concern, I have 2 questions or concerns. One is around, this is an annual cost and the funding source is ESSER. And so that is like a limited, I'm fine supporting this for now. And if we do it for a year and it's like, you know what, we really need an elementary school version and a middle and high school, or this one isn't working. I don't necessarily know that I'm ready to commit to taking this from the local funding when the ESSER funding runs out. I want to see how it goes personally. And then what was the other piece? Oh, the implementation. I don't know if you're going to talk about that or not, but I just, there's a lot of professional development, a lot that we have on the agenda. And I think this was something that you wanted to start rolling out in the fall. And I do have concerns. I'm supportive of this recommendation. I have concerns about the pacing of that and like trying to do like 7 things, versus doing a few things really well relating to letters, PLCs, MTSS, literacy curriculum. It's a lot of things. So that may not be a question for you. I think that's why I was looking at Dr.
Certainly
Felder.
agree with you, Mrs. Smiley, and that's why there's a concerted effort by the team to really look at how all of this is going to roll out with feedback from school-based staff will be part of that decision-making, yeah.
Okay.
But this is curriculum that teachers requested, right? So we are happy to be able to involve them in the selection process and to deliver on this curriculum.
Okay, great. And I think Will had his hand up and then Bonnie as well.
I did. My question or comment was exactly the same, which is we're putting a lot on the teachers right now, and I'm really concerned with all of this at the same time. And maybe what we can do is in our retreat or something, talk about how these roll out, or just get an understanding of that.
That information at that time will certainly will do so.
Yeah, and I'm very supportive, and I know at least some of our schools desperately need this, and they would put it on their priority list. So I share Sarah and Will's concern. I would really love your team to do more formal discussions with current users and ask the vendor to give you some users and set up meetings with you to talk to them about the impact on their teachers, the adoption, what worked, how they would do it differently. It is invaluable to us in terms of getting the implementation right. So please do that.
I will take that back to the team. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. At this time, if there isn't further questions or comments, do I have a motion to approve the allocation of funding for this?
So moved.
Second.
Motion from Ms. Smiley, a second from Vice Chair Stevens. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Great. Thank you so much, Mr.
Thank you.
Grafenreid, for you.
Thank
Your
you.
work and your team's work. Okay, Dr. Felder.
Okay, so next up would be the draft 2022-2025 academically and intellectually gifted AIG plan. And so joining us at the podium is Dr. Denise Green, new Chief Academic Officer. Also joining us is Latoya Warren Robinson. She's the Student Talent Development Coordinator, and Dr. Chris Gammon, Executive Director of Curriculum and Instruction. Welcome.
Thank you, everybody, for joining us tonight, particularly Ms. Warren Robinson for the first time at our board meeting. So welcome.
Welcome.
Yeah.
Well, good evening, Board Chair Doyle, Vice Chair Stevens, Superintendent Dr. Felder, board members, and the community. Well, before I begin the AIG presentation, I'd like to take a moment of personal privilege to express my appreciation to Ms. Stevens and Ms. McKenzie for the number of years of service to the students, staff, and Orange County community, for your years of service to the Board of Education and your leadership to our community. And while I did not work during your tenure, I will indeed benefit from your legacy here in the county.
So kind.
I
Thank
do
you.
wish you well.
Thank you. That's very kind of you.
Well, this evening, I have the pleasure to have my accelerated, academically and intellectually gifted team present the AIG plan. And while this is a 3-year plan that we present, it is a plan that is indeed very fluid. And you will hear tonight that the revision to the 2022-2025 year plan that would include this year, include the revision process, the changes in the new plan, as well as the accountability measures they've put in. So at this time, I'm pleased to have Dr. Chris Gammon, the Executive Director of Curriculum and Instruction, and Ms. LaToya Warren Robinson, Student Talent Development Coordinator, present to you the AIG Plan.
Thank you, Dr. Green.
All right, thank you, Dr. Green. Good evening, Chair Doyle, Vice Chair Stevens, members of the board, Dr. Felder, and community. I'd like to echo Dr. Green's sentiments and thank you both for your service to Orange County Schools in support of our work. It's truly been a privilege, and I appreciate you both for your years of service. Ms. Warren Robinson, our Student Talent Development Facilitator, and I stand before you this evening to present for your review and approval the draft of the 2022 to 25 AIG Plan. Through this presentation, we will identify the core tenets of Article 9B, communicate our shared mission and vision, acknowledge successes and celebrations noted in the existing board-approved and state-recognized AIG Plan, define what our talent development framework model is, inform the board and community of the ongoing steps we have taken and will continue to take to gather stakeholder input to consistently revise the AIG Plan, highlight strengths and opportunities for growth across each of the 6 standards, and discuss key goals and actions as well as our rationale for these areas of focus. Now, that's a mouthful. That's a lot to cover. Go to the next slide. Thank you. So the AIG Plan is driven by Article 9B. Article 9B is the current legislation mandating identification services for gifted education K through 12. The policy provides a state definition of AIG students and rationale for the AIG program standards. The AIG program standards are critical in providing a statewide framework for quality programming while still honoring local flexibility. The standards are carefully reviewed to determine if revisions are necessary to further support the development of high-quality gifted programs. So the district AIG plan, as Dr. Green noted, it is fluid. While this plan that we are going to present is submitted every 3 years, as was mentioned, to the state, it can be reviewed and revised as needed at the local level each year. So first, our mission, our vision, our shared beliefs. In Orange County Schools, we believe that giftedness exists within all ethnic, geographic, and socioeconomic groups, that students demonstrate gifted behaviors in many ways, and that gifted learners have unique learning needs. We aim to provide a program of inclusive gifted education within a talent development framework, which we'll hear more about here shortly, that recognizes and responds to diverse, outstanding abilities. We will provide a program of inclusive gifted education through those North Carolina AIG program standards or critical actions. The 6 program standards, as you can see here on the screen, or critical actions, are Standard 1, screening, referral, and identification processes that recognize diverse forms of giftedness. Comprehensive policy and programming aligned to the North Carolina AIG program standards and the OCS strategic plan, that's Standard 2. Standard 3 is differentiated curriculum and instruction that enriches and enhances the North Carolina Standard Course of Study. Standard 4 is ongoing and comprehensive opportunities for high-quality professional development concerning the needs of gifted learners. Standard 5 is consistent and meaningful partnerships with our diverse community stakeholders. And Standard 6 is implementing, monitoring, and evaluation of the local AIG program and plan to ensure comprehensive effectiveness. Before we dig deeper into each of the 6 standards, it's critically important to pause and celebrate. In the spring of 2021, 8 promising practices from districts across the state were highlighted for each of the 6 critical actions, with representation from 1 district per region in North Carolina. Orange County Schools was highlighted for one of those promising practices, where we are providing a range of services within the program, and we're aligning those services to research-based talent development framework with a clearly articulated purpose and scope for services at different grade bands, which you will learn more about this evening. So grades K2, the experience and exposure strand, grades 3-5, the talent development strand, grades 6-8 are the independence and agency strands, and then grades 9-12 are where we are planning for the future. At this time, I'm going to turn it over to Ms. Warren Robinson, our Student Talent Development Facilitator, to share more about our talent development framework.
Good evening. It is a privilege to be in the room where it happens. That is from Hamilton, by the way. All right. So I would like to share with you our talent development framework. While we wish to celebrate strengths within the existing plan, we also must acknowledge that our goals and actions are intended to operationalize the talent development framework to levels that did not occur during the pandemic. The talent development framework emphasizes that giftedness is manifested in multiple ways, including high IQ, but also that ability is malleable, influenced by opportunities, and develops over time. Our plan revision process. Through the revision process, we received feedback that spoke to areas of the current plan that we needed to carry through. We also received feedback on opportunities for growth. We want the plan to be more tangible. As our district leadership team continues to work within our new strategic plan, we are mindful that simply listing actions or strategies for improvement, while well-intended, will not ensure we are as efficient with our time and our resources. You'll see an outline there of the plan revision process that was taken. We started in the fall of 2021, which I started in late September, early October. And during that time, district leadership and AIG specialists reviewed the existing plan and identified strengths and growth opportunities. I also used that time to learn a little bit more about my AIG specialists, build relationships with them. I also used that time during the fall to do a strength and needs assessment just from those AIG specialists. I wanted to be able to hear what were the things that they were currently doing within the plan that they felt were working? What were some of the things that they realized, hey, it was something that we wanted to be able to do during this 2019-22 plan cycle that we just were not able to do. I also wanted to know, what are the things that you need from district leadership? Also during this time in the fall of 2021, the district team analyzed each standard and provided verbal and written feedback. Shifting into the spring of 2022, we shared a program survey, which was provided to all schools, students, families, teachers. These surveys were created by the North Carolina Department of Instruction's Gifted and Advanced Learners Division, and we modified the surveys just to reflect an OCS name. We did not change the questions or the scales that were used within the surveys. We didn't change any of that. The only thing that we changed was just adding OCS there, and also just brief descriptions to say thank you or who to reach out to if you had further questions. Those were the only changes that were made. Those surveys again included parent guardians, students, teachers. Also during the spring of 2022, we conducted a family focus night. It was recorded and posted on the OCS website. We sent invitations out to 45 families, and we had 7 of those families to join us on that night. I also provided opportunities for families who were not able to meet with us on the night of May 19th. I then met with those families individually during a 2 to 3 week time span. And then also in the spring of 2022, the draft AIG plan was posted. Both the English version as well as the Spanish version were posted on the OCS webpage for community stakeholder feedback. I would also like to add that during this time period as well, this process also included my own participation in monthly along with quarterly AIG coordinator meetings that were held by the North Carolina Department of Public Instruction. And through those monthly and quarterly meetings, I was able to get a chance to interact with districts around us, along with districts throughout the state, to gather their input about practices similar to ones that we had in place and plan to put in place, to gather their feedback about their experiences with those practices. Standard 1, so we're going to move into our standards, and we're going to provide you what that standard is. We'll highlight some of the key practices that are noted within our plan for those standards. We will also include feedback that we gathered from our stakeholders about the standard, and then we will also share goals and action steps that we have for that standard. Standard 1, identification. It articulates the expectation for student identification procedures. Highlights of some of the key practices shared in this standard include the continuation of universal screening in grade 2 and above as needed, as well as the use of 4 pathways to determine identification. Those AIG pathways, we have provided you there with a visual to those pathways. Our plan outlines the steps in K through 12 screening and referral processes that lead to identification. We will continue to utilize 4 identification pathways. Based on feedback from parents, guardians, and families, we felt it was important to develop processes that were clear, with common vocabulary, defined for both the screening and referral process. One lens, as I was going through the plan on my own and doing a close read, I thought of the plan from the lens of a parent or guardian who is unfamiliar with the program. I thought of the plan as that classroom teacher who may not be used to receiving those supports from an AIG specialist. And I wanted to be able to break the plan down in such a way that it was easy to understand for those in the community as well, because we felt that that was very important based on some conversations that we had just been having collectively and just from hearing, say, from the community as well. In response to AIG screening, referral, and identification procedures for our underrepresented populations, we will work to strengthen our universal early learning experiences through partnerships with local, state, and/or national experts to gain further insight on ways to expand the view of giftedness, how to systematically search for students with the potential to achieve at high levels, and how to assist with the creation of programs and services that emphasize identifying students from culturally, linguistically, and ethnically diverse populations. We are not a silo, and we don't want to be known as such, and so we want to involve as many as we can. We have to. The elementary AIG specialists began some of this work this past school year, and we look forward to providing similar professional learning opportunities for our K-2 classroom teachers, as well as our classroom teachers 3 through 12. The next slide, you'll see there's data from our spring 2022 AIG child count. NCDPI gathers an official AIG child count from all 115 LEAs and select charter schools. And this is typically done in the spring and fall around April 15th to April 30th, and then November 15th to November 30th. In April, 18.44%, roughly 1,308 students of the OCS student population were identified as AIG. At the time of this child count, the report provided that OCS served 7,092 students. The AIG child count reflects an underrepresentation of our Black and Hispanic student populations in comparison to those same subgroups at the district level. The child count also shows an underrepresentation of female students in 3 of our 6 subgroups, as well as an underrepresentation of males in 3 of our 6 subgroups. Overrepresentation is seen in the Asian, American Indian, white, and multi-subgroups. As previously mentioned, it is our intent to continue to seek professional learning opportunities for our specialists and our classroom teachers to gain further insights on ways to expand the views of giftedness. Here you will see in the identification area that 34.7% of the 1,308 AIG students are identified as AG, or academically gifted, in reading and math. As stated in Standard 1 of our AIG plan, Practice B, the minimum percentile in either aptitude or achievement is 95 in order for a child to qualify for AI, AG, AM, or AR gifted services. And those abbreviations are listed there for you as well. Highly gifted, which we refer to in our plan as HG, highly gifted totals are not provided in the child count. However, we'll be working to determine the number of students who are identified as such. Stakeholder feedback for Standard 1 shows that many of our stakeholders believe that the identification process is accessible, it's clear, and it's easy to understand, and that the criteria is fair. However, many of our stakeholders provided growth opportunities in the area of ongoing communications and updates on the supports being given, clearer understanding of criteria for identification with a consideration for our multilingual families, along with the differentiated plans, also known as the DEP in our district, are reviewed and communicated inconsistently. Our goal for this standard is by June of 2023, 100% of OCS schools will establish and implement a portfolio process. Our strategies include to develop and implement a consistent district portfolio model and rating system. In my conversations with AIG specialists, the topic of portfolio was one that some people had this in mind, others thought they were doing this, and there did not seem to be any consistency amongst those practices. And there may be many reasons why that is so. And so we want to, moving forward, be able to take a closer look at our portfolio process, because we realize that for many of our students, a standardized test is not going to be all that you can use to determine if they are gifted. Also, a strategy included in that standard is to partner with other North Carolina school districts to observe the portfolio process. I was able to do that during our AIG facilitator coordinator meetings each month. And I sat in on a portfolio review for students in Charlotte-Mecklenburg schools, a group of 3rd graders in Charlotte-Mecklenburg schools. And I later shared with Dr. Gammon that I think we all need to be involved in this. And so I'm now in communication with Charlotte-Mecklenburg schools to see if we will be able to allow our AIG specialists to also be able to witness one of those portfolio processes, and allow us to be able to then to reflect on our own practices, look for ways that we can make changes in that, and continue to strengthen that process.
All right, so standard 2 addresses comprehensive programming within the total school community to meet the diverse academic, intellectual, social, and emotional needs of gifted learners. These services will develop students' strengths through intentional learning experiences in various domains that are not dependent on the student's demographic background or economic means. A few ways we are working to address Standard 2 is through the integration of AIG services through the MTSS structure. Additionally, providing opportunities for acceleration, including single subject or whole grade level, as well as flexible grouping and clustering when developing master schedules through the lens of MTSS. As noted earlier in the presentation, another way we are addressing Standard 2 currently is by aligning services to a research-based talent development framework across grade spans. But as Ms. Warren-Robinson noted, while we were recognized for these, operationalizing this is something that was somewhat problematic through the pandemic, and it's important for us to acknowledge that as we move forward. So based on feedback from parents, guardians, instructional staff, including AIG specialists, the process for single subject acceleration needed to be clearly outlined. Changes were made to the existing plan to reflect that feedback. We also included the reconstruction of the compacted math course opportunities that had been previously presented at the middle grades, as well as more accelerated opportunities at high school. Our first priority within the MTSS framework is to ensure that all learners, and that includes academically and intellectually gifted learners, receive high-quality core instruction. And so I know that we typically share when we're talking about an MTSS framework, you can see, and it's a smaller visual there, but the triangle icon where our differentiated core instruction is there in the green at the bottom, that should be the majority of our students accessing core instruction on grade level. And then as you work up those tiers of support, in yellow, we call it tier 2 or supplemental support, and then tier 3 being intensive support. The purpose of showing the two graphics this evening is to be very mindful that core means all students, okay? So all students, regardless of their achievement or their current status, that they're all needing differentiated and high quality core instruction. But as you look at this diamond shape, when we think of AIG, it is important to remember that although gifted students are generally thought to be provided enrichment or acceleration, as noted on the right side of the diamond, they may also be provided tier 2 and tier 3 supplemental and intensive support that you see reflected on the left side of the diamond based on the needs of the individual student, the standards and the concepts that are being taught at any given time. So based on a variety of feedback, a couple of strengths to highlight here in Standard 2 are that the social emotional learning needs of all students are addressed across our schools, and the districts and schools are consciously working to provide appropriate support to underrepresented student populations. And as we saw earlier this evening, we know that we can strengthen the social emotional processes through a robust core curriculum. Stakeholders did also express a need for increased awareness and understanding of acceleration opportunities, especially once students reach middle grades in high school. We heard that quite often through our feedback sessions. Therefore, a goal for us in Standard 2, when thinking of our secondary level especially, is by 2025, Orange County Schools will increase the percentage of students taking at least one advanced placement or AP course from 34.2% to 54.2%, and the percentage of students taking at least one International Baccalaureate or IB course from currently 10.4% to 30.4%. The strategies that we will embark on to help us get to that space is to really increase those advanced course pathways in the early high school years. Our AVID programming, which we've presented on and look forward to presenting more about in the future. Our partnership with Equal Opportunity Schools, as well as really targeted professional development in these areas of AP and IB at our high schools, and just communication as families are transitioning from middle school to high school, being very transparent about these opportunities and making sure that there's a clear awareness when entering high school.
Standard 3 is differentiated curriculum instruction. And in this standard, it articulates the expectation of the LEA to employ challenging, rigorous, and relevant curriculum and instruction K-12 to accommodate a range of academic, intellectual, social, and emotional needs of gifted learners. Highlights of some of the key practices shared in this standard include collaboration with classroom teachers to extend, enrich, and/or accelerate the North Carolina Standard Course of Study. This was important coming from a classroom teacher lens. I taught 6th, 7th, and 8th grade language arts, and during my last year prior to COVID, I served in AIG, 2 AIG clusters of students, and I received no support in that role. That's gonna be a later conversation. But those babies grew. It is also worthy to note but it was intentional. It is also worthy to note the use of instructional and grouping strategies to support the social and emotional growth for all identified students, as well as targeted support for individual students. District initiatives seen in this standard and its practices include the intentional involvement of AIG specialists in district curriculum mapping work, as well as professional learning community, professional development over the course of the next 2 years. Finally, the use of an MTSS-driven master schedule. The rest of the slide provides an overview of some of the tiered practices that have been put in place to accommodate a range of academic and intellectual needs of gifted learners. The next slide, while the previous slide provided a glimpse into the range of academic and intellectual practices that are provided, the information on this slide provides an overview of some of the practices that have been put in place to accommodate a range of social and emotional needs of gifted learners. Many specialists expressed that they had seen an increase in the need for social and emotional teaching practices during their time serving nurtured and identified students. And so it was important in the plan to outline the ways that we would be able to, we want to work with classroom teachers, school counseling personnel to be able to support that social and emotional needs that we're seeing there in our students. For this standard, strength and growth opportunities, again, as we stated, were provided by our stakeholders. Growth opportunities include consistent, differentiated plans, education plan communication, providing intentional support for students taking online courses through North Carolina virtual public schools, and providing opportunities for parents and guardians to become better informed about acceleration opportunities and processes for those. Next slide. Our goal for Standard 3, by June 2024, building administrators and AIG specialists will collect evidence of early intervention and talent development opportunities at each elementary school. Strategies to help us meet this goal include curriculum mapping, develop collaboratively with AIG specialists, PLC coaching with Solution Tree, and targeted professional development with consultants.
All right, so Standard 4 focuses on recruitment and retention of highly qualified professionals, and doing so through effective ongoing professional development concerning the diverse needs of gifted learners. So Orange County Schools is taking critical steps in this direction, as Ms. Warren Robinson just noted, by providing targeted professional development, focusing on PD to include non-traditional characteristics of giftedness. We are also grateful to our school board for your support in ensuring we are staffing each elementary and middle school with a full-time AIG specialist, and for approving our investment in supporting those professional learning communities through that partnership with Solution Tree. And so each of these actions align with addressing growth opportunities that did bubble up through stakeholder input. Another way that we endeavor to actively recruit and retain highly qualified professionals is to increase the percentage of Orange County Schools teachers acquiring their AIG certification. Our goal is to increase that by 10% in the year 2025. Not only will this increase teacher capacity to meet the needs of all learners within core instruction, as we noted, but this can also support internal growth as we look to ensure all schools are staffed with certified AIG specialists.
Standard 5, partnerships. In this practice, the expectation of the LEA is to provide ongoing and meaningful participation of stakeholders in the planning and implementation of the local AIG program to develop strong partnerships. Highlights of some of the key practices shared, in the standard include establishing an AIG advisory group. We also intend to form two-way partnerships with community stakeholders to enhance and support the local AIG program and services. Stakeholder feedback. Although partnerships and communications with parents, guardians, families, and community stakeholders are happening, we have found that those partnerships and communications have not always been ongoing. We have parent, guardians, families, community stakeholders that have voiced that they want to be included in ways to support gifted education. And I plan to make sure that they help me. During the conversations that I had with the family focus group, many of those families voiced that if they knew more about the opportunities and the need, then that they would be more willing to participate. But often they didn't know, which led to them not participating because they didn't know that there was a need for that. Just in a brief conversation with one of the parents, she mentioned that she works for a company that is science-based right out of Raleigh. And she said, oh my goodness, I never thought about saying, well, what about bringing those opportunities, because they provide opportunities for the students of Wake County, but I live in Orange County. What about seeing if my job would be willing to bring those services, that program, to Orange County? So she and I will be working in the future to be able to start that partnership with that company. Our goal for Standard 5 was driven by 41% of parents and guardians who stated that the district rarely forms partnerships with stakeholders within the community, such as institutions of higher education, local businesses and industries, and community members to enhance and support AIG programs and services. Strategies to attain 100% satisfactory rating by June of 2025 include monthly or quarterly AIG advisory committee meetings, robust and maintained AIG district webpage, along with the establishment of quarterly newspapers. Because again, many of our parents, guardians, families stated that the lines of communication somewhere probably during the pandemic dwindled, and we want to be able to communicate in a variety of ways with our parents and our guardians and families.
All right, so we're at Standard 6. So lastly, Standard 6 focuses on program accountability. In addition to family, student, and teacher surveys, family focus groups, the school-based curriculum nights, which we've traditionally had, especially pre-pandemic, and we know will be hopefully more of a process as we go into the fall. We are aware through this of the critical need to reestablish and engage frequently with our advisory committee throughout the duration of the plan cycle to ensure that we are making data-informed revisions, that those adjustments are happening at the local level, not just 3 years from now, but that should be something that's ongoing. As Ms. Warren Robinson previously mentioned, we will embark on an application process for that. We do want to make sure that that committee is as inclusive as possible while also addressing some of the restrictions in the 2019 to 22 plan about parent and family participation. So at this time, and we can get one more slide. Yeah, so at this time, we're actually at a space where we can take questions.
Thank you so much, Ms. Warren Robinson and Dr. Gammon and Dr. Green. You have such a strong team. It's really great to see this presentation tonight. It's exciting. I know we need to keep our questions a little bit brief, but I know people are going to have comments and questions. So who would like to start with one? Will?
Not right now, but I would love to see the AIG breakdown by school with the subgroup data. If we could get that for maybe one of our board weekly updates. But the question I had was AIG certifications. Is there any compensation of any kind for people doing that?
So the intent would be that there would be support in getting that certification so that the district, and this was a practice that happened prior to COVID, but that there would be a support of whether it's taking a praxis, it would be helping to financially support that endeavor if teachers wanted to invest in that the district would help with that cost.
So that plan is in place now, or is that needed to be?
So that plan was in place prior to the pandemic. That's a plan that we would like to sustain now moving forward. Now, obviously, that's going to be a lot of communication with Ms. Rath and others, and she's aware of that, but that's definitely a goal for us.
Thank you.
Others? Sarah?
I just echo the thanks for the very detailed presentation, and highlighting what it is you want to change and improve in each of these standard areas was really helpful. I want to confirm, so it sounds like we plan to continue the nurturing programs in grades like 3 to 5, to identify more students in those grades. Is that right? Okay. A thought that I have around standard 5 and the partnerships, the strategies here are sort of district level strategies, and yet I think so much of what influences this is at the classroom level and the building level, and whether I actually feel like my child is being challenged and getting the additional services they need. And so for that one, I would just I think these things are really important, and I think your highest impact strategies are going to be around that, around the how are we addressing the in this classroom with in this grade level in this school piece. And then I have one more thing, but I'll pass.
Okay. Other people with questions? Ronnie?
I have, first of all, I wanted to thank you for this, and I love the perspective from the teachers and the parents, and just flipping that around. And I don't know, it's not a trapezoid, but it's the back-to-back triangles where you had MTS go in to interventions and MTS going to excellence. I've been waiting to see that for my whole, it's just great. So thank you for that. Go back to, because you talked about a lot of things. So at the end of the day, who is responsible for identifying gifted children?
At the end of the day, a lot of it does fall on the AIG specialists. And so it is important for us to build the capacity of those classroom teachers, because the AIG specialist is only one person. And we want to strengthen our teacher capacity so that we are able to identify more students. So in the end, it is the AIG specialist, but we really want to build the teacher capacity so that we can target more students.
So if I could just elaborate, just to what extent do we rely on parents to identify?
That's a great question.
So, I think currently there is a parent, there could be a parent process, and that's stated in the plan but there has to be certain assessments that go along with that. That's something that we're not going to stand in the way of, but I think if there's a parent suggestion in that space, that gets back to even the portfolio process. If there's an identification of talent in certain spaces, we need to have a consistent protocol of where does that fall within this continuum, and then how are we measuring that? Is that measurement happening with outside assessments? Is that measurement happening with something we do internally in the district?
Yeah, so just my question was kind of the opposite of that, is are we over-reliant on parents, on more affluent parents to identify their kids? And Because I know you talked about reaching into parents who might not understand AIG, but I was curious, to what extent are we identifying kids because their parents are pushing it? That's just, you don't have to answer, it's just a real
Right. And I
question.
think, when I think in the plan itself, it really addresses what that criteria is. If there is a parent suggestion on that end or intent, there's still a process that has to be followed.
Dr. Felder.
Understanding is, I appreciate your question, Ms. Hauser, is that as we ramp up and provide more direction around the portfolio process, one of those pieces should be a parent survey, right? Because the research tells us that at least 90% of the time, parents are pretty accurate with regards to their children's ability. And so to Ms. Warren Robinson's point, that right now that's one person making a decision, it should be a team making the decision, and parents should be able to give input into that decision-making process from where they sit. So there will be a number of criteria that are used in that portfolio process.
I have a question that that maybe if you could tell me if I'm kind of right about this or not. And this is from a parent's perspective and at times advocating for some other kids as well. Is this an accurate description of how things have changed in Orange County schools over the past 15 years or so, Dr. Gammon? So it seems like once upon a time, if you had a young child like K1, K2, who sometimes would get pulled aside, they'd sometimes create or put them in AIG if they were showing like some really high aptitude. Maybe there was variation school by school, and then it seemed like we pulled away from doing that and then moved towards more the K2 nurturing that we heard a lot about like in the past couple of years, and not doing so much pull out or specialized things for kids in that grade bracket. And so now we're doing all that push in K2 so that all kids are getting built up in those ways and having opportunities. And as Sarah mentioned, we're building that nurturing into higher grades too, so that we can keep reaching kids. But am I also hearing, as I was reading through the plan, that there is going to be identification of kids in younger grades, but maybe we're trying to do it more consistently across the district, and that's where the portfolio, okay. Great. Sarah and then Will.
So something, one thing is that it was great to see what the current representation is, percent of students identified by race and gender. I would love to see that like over time. I know we've reported on that in the past, so just seeing how that's changed would be really helpful. And I had a specific question around the dual identified students. And I have a student who's twice exceptional and she doesn't mind me saying so. And so I'm curious, in the pie chart, it's like 2.4% are dual identified. Does that only include students who are like classified as exceptional children, or does it include students with 504s? Because like my kid has like a specific learning disability, but because of the giftedness, she doesn't have the same, it's the way that you identify kids for EC has changed. And so I'm just curious sort of who's included in that dual identified category.
Those students that you mentioned are included in that dual identification area.
Like including the ones who have like a 504 but aren't necessarily receiving EC services.
Correct.
Okay. And then I guess a related question I have about something that I have learned is that very often there are certain learning disabilities that very often can go with giftedness, like dyslexia, and so I guess I'm wondering whether there are any things we do as we identify actually a student who has a learning disability to then sort of be alert to, I wonder if they are also gifted. And I'm just curious overall sort of how our identification of exceptional children and children with learning differences, how that sort of compares to other districts. Are we sort of under-identifying, over-identifying? So you don't know the answer to that last one, but I would be curious as we go back and look at the data to just understand that.
Okay, I know Will had a question or comment.
Yeah, mine was exactly on EC, and what is the percentage of EC students that are in the AIG program? And then second, similar to what Ms. Smiley was saying, is there anything unique we're doing for EC students to identify them versus the standard testing. I would just be curious if there's anything specific y'all are doing.
Yeah, not that I can speak to currently, but I think that's something that we can definitely take note of and work with Ms. Crimmins and her team.
Excellent, thank you.
To your point, Mr. Atherton, I think it would be helpful if we looked at the data on not only EC children, but our multilingual children, as well as our students who are economically disadvantaged. We
Yes.
need to look at all groups.
Yeah, that's, when I said subgroup, that's really what I meant. Thank you.
I figured as such.
Yeah. I might suggest, Chapel Hill has a fairly advanced framework for what are they called? Double E? Anyway. So I really did enjoy the presentation. Dr. Gavin, I appreciate your candor at the beginning about some of the inconsistency we've had as a district with delivering AIG services school by school. And I would just ask, and of course there's an intention, but then there's reality. So I hope that you'll be reporting to us and hammering us if you see these disparities in service levels across schools, because they're happening in the wrong schools. So we really want to hear from you, not from parents on that, if you would. Thank you.
Thank you so much for all of your work. This feels really robust and thorough, and our recommendation is that we receive and approve this AIG plan revision. Is that correct, Dr. Felder? Is there more that you want to say?
No, that would be correct. So based on what was presented tonight, we'd like to move forward with submitting our plan to the state, realizing that we can always go back and revise it as needed.
Which is why draft was in the
Yes, ma'am.
assembly
Right,
language.
that's exactly right.
So moved.
Second.
Motion from Ms. Hauser, a second from Vice Chair Stevens. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Great, thank you so much.
It's wonderful.
Okay, we have Mr. Avala's coming up, and we have some information on operations and maintenance contracts, and also health and safety. And then I know we have the several items that we have pulled from consent. Sorry, Patrick, I'm just trying to double check ourselves. So policy update, facility usage, and SRO contract extension.
All right, so the first one we wanted to go through was the operations maintenance annual recurring contracts. These are 3 contracts identified that are above the superintendent's threshold limit that we're bringing to the board for approval. The first one is our safety and security contract. There was a 5-year contract for installation and services back in 2020. That included all the hardware, camera system upgrades, and access control systems within the district. As part of that contract, there's an ongoing annual maintenance fee. That's to be $158,616 for next school year. We are asking for an additional $30,000 of authorization for any service upgrades that are identified to meet our security plan priorities. And so that would bring a total contract that we're recommending for approval of $188,616. Questions or comments about that one?
Okay.
I do, but I can't ask them in open session.
Oh, okay.
So I'll just defer to closed session later.
Okay, which we will have. We turn to closed session tonight.
All right. So the second is our landscape and fire ant services. Again, there was an RFP for 3 years, formal bid process that was completed in 2019. We had a 3-year contract with Murray's Landscape Maintenance and Horticultural Services. That contract expires on June 30th, 2022. We've been happy and satisfied with that service and recommending an additional 2 years of services with them. In addition, this past year, they have provided fire ant treatment as we move to outdoor learning environments to protect our campuses with students outside either eating or just outside in general use of the exterior areas during COVID. And so the total contract recommended for 2022-2023 is $248,100, and that does include just a minor price increase that they've now included going into year 4. And then we will rebid this following the 2 years in January 2024. We would recommend that a rebid process be gone through. Questions or comments about the landscape?
Well,
Just a quick comment. The existing company, I believe, does do internship with high school students, and I believe during one of the award ceremonies or something, all of those students that were interns all went to college, and so they're getting additional people. So I'm glad to hear that. One question is for the fire ants. Do we know if that's environmentally friendly that they're using for the fire ant controls?
It is environmentally friendly, the best that we can do to control the problem. We also follow an integrated pest management solution as required by the state. And so use of pesticides is a last resort. It's not a first resort. However, what we have noticed is within many of our programs, if we don't have an ongoing treatment, then the problem tends to become worse. And we have had severe allergic reactions to bites and medical emergencies due to bites on school campuses. So from a health and safety standpoint, we do feel it's necessary to have an ongoing preventative maintenance program to control fire ants on the campus.
Thank you.
Okay.
And then the third one, we do have Miss Sylvia Compton joining us virtually this evening, is Nurse Support Services. You recall at the last meeting, we talked about and discussed a plan to add supplemental nursing supports within the district, of which we're still working through a funding source for that. Prior to COVID and through COVID, the district also utilized an annual service agreement with Diesel Clinical in order to provide staffing for school nurses when school nurse vacancies were happening or when there was an additional need to bring in those staffing individuals, whether someone was out long-term or there was a vacancy, so there was a need to bring in someone immediately. So as a stopgap measure, we are recommending the contract next year to be in place, approximately $60,000. We would anticipate if the other program goes into place where we have those additional support personnel, then obviously that's going to be our first resort, would be to utilize the current individuals. But if they're not available, we have to have a measure, especially with Hillsborough starting up in a couple weeks if the school nurse is out or we have vacancies, to be able to call in these staffing agencies to bring individuals on site to help us. And so we are preemptively asking to go ahead and get these contracts in place for next year, just in case we have additional support that's needed. And Sylvia, if she's able to join us virtually, can probably add to that as well.
Do we have any
Yes,
questions?
hi, I'm here.
Hey, Ms. Compton.
Hi.
Do you have anything you want to add, or I have a couple board members with questions.
Yeah, I just wanted to add the reason that we're presenting the contracts is because we also have a nursing shortage. So we want to have the availability to find staff as quickly as possible. Between two agencies, we obviously don't pay unless we use their services.
Great.
And then Sylvia, can you just mention quickly where we have vacancies in the district?
Absolutely. Right now, we're looking for a full-time position at Orange High School and a full-time nurse position at Orange Middle School.
Okay. Bonnie and then Sarah, and I think Will had his hand up as well.
It looked like roughly about $100,000 in cost increases. I was curious where the money's coming from.
So there was my understanding was these contracts were covered previously through a GEAR grant at the federal level, and that money is going to be exhausted or it runs out as of December. So we're still looking for additional funding sources. Locally, we do have a budget for school health services. It's been within the student services department. Now, obviously, school health is within operations. And so we do not have a budget at this time set up specifically for these health services. So Rhonda's here and she can give you a little more information on that.
Wanda's here. It's like Mikey.
Auntie Esser, as they call me. I think the first place that I would recommend that we do take a look at this funding would probably be in Esser, because the need here is 100% as a result of what we're dealing with still with COVID, and it's a valid expenditure. And so my recommendation would be that that is the first place that we take a look to try to fund this from those federal resources.
And just to clarify, we're talking specifically about the nursing salary, because also it mentions in here that funding will be allocated through the lap salaries as well, since there's been vacancies, so.
Absolutely.
I'm talking about all three, so.
Okay, you're talking about all three.
So the first one, the security and safety, we have through our capital budget, recurring line items for security and safety. So that one's identified, the funding source there. The landscape and fire ant services, that's allocated through the local maintenance budget.
Other questions?
The magic question is this budgeted in the continuation in the budget, or is this part of the 3.1 million?
It is in the continuation budget, as this is a service that we have already paid for. So it is included in the continuation budget.
My only question was going to be about the funding, and I'm glad that we don't pay for anything unless we need to use it and that you all are getting this in place. So thank you.
Will, did you have your hand up?
Yeah, just one question. I noticed that it mentioned in the breakdown or the contract, the total per hour rate included everything but travel, but then in the mileage cost, it says we'll be charged for traveling between our facilities. So my guess is we're not charged when they're driving to it, but then once they're there, if they have to travel within the district, we'll have a separate charge?
That's correct. It's standard practice. If they're just going to a base school and that's their base school for the day, there's no charge for that. But if you're asking them to leave one site and go to multiple sites through the day, then the standard practice would be we pay mileage at that point in time.
Based on the IRS standard?
Correct.
All right, thanks.
Okay. Is anyone ready to make a motion on this, or are there further questions for you, Brenda?
No questions.
Motion to approve.
Second?
That's fine. That's fine.
Motion from Ms. McKenzie and a second from Ms. Smiley. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Wonderful. Thank you, Mr. Abilene.
I'm going to roll right into our health and safety protocol updates. We gave the board an update at the last board meeting in reference to, I lost the clicker, in reference to the health and safety updates. And at that time, what we discussed was during the summer months, not using the 2% cap that was in place for a trigger point for required indoor masking, because our numbers would be so low within the summer programs. Well, on June 17th, the state came out and redefined this Strong Schools Toolkit. We worked with the health department. And so this evening, we're bringing back an additional recommendation for the summer months. Next slide. And so one of the things that's changed is the definition of a cluster in a non-congregate living setting like a school. Again, minimum of 5 laboratory confirmed cases within a 14-day period. And that's part of the change. It's been shortened from a 28, 21, and now it's down to 14 days as the look back period, or 15 or more laboratory confirmed cases within 14 days associated within that same setting. And so that expands that number up to 15. So those are two key changes that came out that were discussed with the health department on June 17th from the state. Next slide. So therefore, our recommendations are, as we think about the cluster recommendations, we think about those by program versus the entire school. An example I'll give you very quickly is when we say the entire campus has to mask, what we've noticed with summer programs is we have isolated programs within the buildings. For instance, we may have one program that the students come in, they're in the gymnasium, they're there, and then they leave and go home. We have another program in the J wing, And we have another program in the A wing. The students don't cross and mix. They don't ride the same buses. They don't eat lunch together. And so if we have a cluster within that program, certainly we would do required indoor masking for that program. But does it make sense to do it school-wide at that point in time when these groups don't associate, the students don't interact, and there is no epidemiological link or cases associated with them? And so what we're asking for tonight is, rather than that trigger point be the required masking across the entire campus, we look at it by program. And certainly if the programs cross or intermix, either through buses, cafeteria, or using the same areas within the school, then it would be difficult for us to say the kids weren't involved with each other with the cases. Those are going to be linked together. But we would want to just provide additional flexibility in that. The second item is, again, the Orange County Health Department receives reports of the 15 or more. And then they are asking that the masking, instead of being a week or the 5 days, it would be for a full 10-day period. Because of the transmissibility and the case look backs and going back through the cases and the clusters, that would be a change, would be to require that indoor masking for 10 days versus 7 days. And then we would keep our masking exemptions as previous outlined. So those are our recommendations this evening, just further tweaking the information we shared on June 13th. Sylvie, do you have anything you'd like to add?
One reason the state did decide to go ahead and decrease the original time frame as far as clusters. When we would do a cluster look back period, technically when we can connect cases, there is a 14-day window after an exposure when someone can become symptomatic. In this situation, they're not specifying that. What they're saying is we would have a 28-day period to make the connection between 5 links that were that had an epidemiological connection. That's what they shortened, the 28-day period from the 5 linkage. Now they want to see 5 cases that can be connected, but all 5 of them within a 14-day period. And then the addition, like Mr. Abele explained, if we cannot find a connection, what we're looking for is a report of positive cases that are 15 or more within a 14-day period within that facility or on that campus. That does not mean if we find where we can link outside of that period, once they have deemed a cluster, and that would be our local health department, we can still include any other cases into that original cluster. So they don't report, 2 or 3 clusters because they've had more cases that they can connect after the 14-day time frame. That would still remain the same. The reason that the state has decided to do this is because we know that staffing wise, we just don't have the manpower to continue to do contact tracing, whether it was individual or a presumptive possible exposure. A possible potential exposure. Also, they know we're missing cases because the way that COVID is spreading now is so quickly that by the time we're getting those other reports of cases and we do decide to go ahead and mask either a certain group or the entire campus, we know that it's already spread to, possibly a quarter of the population. So we're trying to go ahead and handle that fairly quickly to stop the spread as quick as possible.
Thank you.
Okay. If I may just note, the requirement that you vote every month on your face covering policy expires this month. So going forward, you do not have to bring this every month.
Thank you.
Just when you need to change it.
That's good news.
That's great. So just a question so I can understand how this will work. So let's say there's a cluster identified and 9, and so they all start masking for 10 days. And then 9 or 10 days into it, there's more people identified. We're going to stop masking at that point, even though we know that there's actively been.
That's where we go by the recommendations at Health Department,
Okay.
looking at the cases and the links between the cases at that point in time. Is this a new cycle that's starting, or are these cases linked together within that 10-day period? And that's the issue of why that time frame gets expanded, because when we start taking off the mask, then it's almost like remasking right over again. And so just to give that additional time for that work to be thoroughly reviewed to make sure there's not a linkage.
So you'd be working with the health department to determine
Oh,
whether to
absolutely.
continue beyond the 10 days.
That's
if it
correct.
seemed like it was like still actively.
Yes.
And then lunches? Like or meal times?
They still take mask off for that. So anytime we get into a required mask setting, we follow our standard protocol we did this school year. We recommend eating outdoors. We recommend to students, spreading out, using physical distancing. If it's inclement weather and we're inside, we do have better ability because of the limited number of the programs to spread students out, utilize ventilation, open windows, doors, et cetera. So we fall back on the same protocol we've been using all year long.
Anyone ready to make a motion?
So moved.
Second. Motion from Ms. McKenzie, a second from Vice Chair Stevens. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you, Mr. Oberlin. I would like to say we would be done 16 minutes early, but no such luck. We are going to discuss some items that were pulled from consent, but that's okay. And I know we're going to keep Mr. Oberlin and Ms. Rath close by. So what sequence would you like to do, Dr. Felder? The two policy ones, we could do those first, and then they kind of move into facility usage fees. Okay, so are we inviting Ms. Hatcher up to talk about the policies?
I'm sorry?
Is Ms. Hatcher coming up to talk about policies, or no? We're just asking our questions about 8100? And can I just tell you that I know we're going to address 8100 really quickly, because, Will, would you like to say what?
Yeah, I just feel like if the intention of the board is to have meetings for the public on a budget, we should say that. I don't think it should be May. I think we should say we're going to do it. We have stronger policies in the state than many items of our policy. So I feel like we've all agreed that we're going to do it. So we just should state it in policy and do what we say.
Okay.
So that's where I am.
Okay, and I think we're all fine with that. Do you want to?
Yeah, we're all in agreement.
We had just adopted the North Carolina School Board Association language that didn't include that, and so would you like to make a
Motion to approve with the change to say may to shall.
Second. Motion for Mr. Atherton, a second from Ms. Smiley, all in favor?
I just, before we do that, because I think what we're really saying is not to change the policy. Right now it says will.
There were other.
There were other changes in there.
100?
Yeah, there were other changes.
Taking it back to that.
Sorry. Okay. I'm an aye. then.
Okay, all in favor? Any opposed? Great. And then there are questions about 50/30 operation with facility use.
Yes.
And I don't know if those were distinct to the policy, or if we're really just talking about facility usage fees. Bonnie, do you have specific questions?
They're related, so we can talk about it all at once. To me, they came up pretty suddenly. It is a fairly steep, it's about a tenfold increase in our fees. We heard from Ms. Mcguire tonight, the impact on longstanding community partners. So I would like to delay it until we've had a chance to review it and leave the current fee structure in place.
Okay, so I know we discussed this quite a bit at policy, so Brenda, if you want to speak to that, but I think we're also going to need to hear from Mr. Abele and why the facility usage fees were presented. But would you like to speak to it?
Will wanted to say something.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Will.
So after our meeting, I went personally and looked into Durham's policy. And I know it's referenced in here, but there's some subtle things that are in Durham's policy that I think we should be looking at as well. For example, in their policy 2035, there's fee structure groups. One is A, fee waivers, and it has a list of when they do that. And then they also have a section that I think really makes sense for us as well. It says impact fees designated for community organizations who impact the community at large. Application fee required, certificate of liability insurance required, reduced facility rate fees, reduced fee rates. So if you're requesting a elementary school, it's reduced to $10 per hour. If you want a middle school, it's 14. If you're wanting high school, it's down to 18. So although Durham is listed here, for example, as $60, it really drops down depending on where you are in the community impact. There's some that is wavered specifically for government, any Durham Public School sponsored partnership. So I feel, well, the other thing I'll say is I also went through Wake, and Wake does a similar thing, multiple pages, where, for example, if you are a nonprofit within the school system and theirs is just a broad stroke of all grades, auditorium, for example, is $22 per hour if it is for a nonprofit. The last one I'll bring up, just as a point that I think we really should look at this more, is the Orange County Parks and Recs facility fee. So if you want to go reserve a full court gymnasium and you're a resident, it's $35 per hour. If you're a non-resident, it's $52.50. So I feel like, comments earlier about $7,000 in bankrupting versus a different fee schedule, especially if it's community related and nonprofit, we really should relook at this and figure out what the right fee is for our community and what makes sense. But that's just from, a quick research across what other districts are doing. Again, I understand that we should look at fees, but my concern is these are pretty significant.
Okay, Sarah?
Some of the things that you mentioned in there do exist in our policy already around like governments not having to pay, and if it's directly district related, that they don't have to pay, and or just only serving district students. So some of the things that you mentioned are in our policy, but they're not on this fee schedule. The policy also says that we need to, I believe, approve a fee schedule by July 1st. So we do need to make a vote tonight, one way or another about this. So I'm confused about whether we're talking about the policy, in which case maybe we need to go back to the policy committee the next time the policy committee meets, versus like this fee schedule. I would just appreciate if we could clarify one versus the other and what we're talking about too.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Mine is the fee schedule.
Okay, so you want to talk about?
Because the policy really does, that's exactly what I was going to say.
Right.
It really does hit a lot of your concerns.
Right. And Brenda, you're the chair of our policy committee.
yeah.
Do you want to say more about the policy?
Yeah, I did want to say that, it didn't creep up on us because, we knew that's something we had to do. And those of us who attended the meeting, we did spend hours talking about this. So this is unfortunate that we are, 9:30 at night, going to broach this subject again, but I agree with you. It's in policy. It's the fee schedule that you all would like to address. But I will say, we talked about in policy how we've sort of, basically been giving space away, and we go to the commissioners and ask for money, but are we being good stewards when we just allow people to use, and, various organizations, I'm not talking about Daryl's organization, there are others that come in there and use our gym, we allowed a charter school, we pretty much gave it to them. And so this is time to stop. So.
And in some instances, we were losing money.
We
We were charging
losing.
so little that it wasn't covering the cost to clean the space or buy the supplies like toilet paper and paper towels and soap and things like that, which doesn't make sense for us to be letting other organizations use it. And I am sympathetic to the public comment tonight and think
Right.
there's room for conversation there. But part of the reason we were having this conversation is that we have just been basically giving away space, and we frankly can't afford to do that.
No, because we have to go to the commissioners and ask for.
Well, and I think the other issue that I know we talked about in policy committee was that things were getting reserved way out and then they'd be unavailable, that because it was such a low threshold, and again, not for this theater
Right.
group, but
Right.
things could be reserved, like, well, I want it every Saturday for the next 6 months. And it's like $5 a week, and then it becomes
They didn't show up.
unavailable.
And they wouldn't even use it.
Yeah.
And then someone
It's
else
blocked.
couldn't use it
Somebody
because
like
it's been
Daryl.
reserved for $5.
Right.
Okay, so hold on. So we can keep talking, but I also want to hear from Patrick, because I'd like to
Right.
hear his rationale, and then if we can have some more feedback. So
Thank you. I'll just make a few brief comments. I don't know about the staffing in Wake or in Durham County, but I know in our operations department, facility rentals and conducting all the business of facility rentals is conducted by myself and my administrative assistant. Back in March, we discussed two things at the board meeting. One was prohibiting facility rentals from March through June 30th. And we discussed about additional time to reassess current policies, procedures, and rental rates, and to bring any recommendations for revisions to the board for approval to be implemented starting July 1, 2022. That was the first conversation we had about a window opening up starting in July, even though we didn't know what conditions we would be in with COVID or any other processes or procedures. So we've had very little window of opportunity to make sure that we were getting everything aligned and ready and in place by July 1. Part of that is making sure that we worked on policy, making sure that we reviewed. But also what we found when we reviewed is these same questions came up to the Board of Education and the superintendent was in place in 2015, and appropriate adjustments were not made. It's been 8 years, and so we are very far behind because we continue to not really assess. The other issue we run into is we simply, from a safety standpoint, cannot have volunteers cleaning buildings after they're used. That was a practice that was allowed. We cannot have doors that are left open and not have appropriate security, safety, and protocols in place when we have an auditorium filled with 300, 500, or 800 people, to make sure that we are responsible for ensuring that appropriate personnel are on site. Should there be an emergency, should there be a safety concern, should there be a fire alarm or other issue that someone on site would be able to know and be able to handle because of being on site. One of the issues with Orange High School, as many of our high schools, we had 4 schools, we don't even have daytime or nighttime on-site custodians. And so many, many years ago, when individuals were using facilities, principals might say, you know, this custodian of my staff, you stay late one night for this group, the other one come in early. We have a lead custodian that's on Orange High School's campus at 6 a.m. I cannot expect them to be every night this group is using the facility for 2 or 3 weeks to stay until 10 p.m. at night. And so having charges is because we have to contract or pay other custodians or other individuals to be on site because we do not have a process that allows for individuals, or shouldn't have a process in our opinion. So our recommendation is we have individuals on site who can clean the building, especially with safety and health regulations and protocol, and what happens when they need toilet paper and soap, and or someone goes to flush the toilet and it starts running all over the floor and nobody's there. Those start to add up very quickly when there's no custodian on site to the damages. Bulbs burn out, you know, things happen. And so it's good having a custodian there who can make sure that emergency protocols followed. So those are certainly the additions to the policy. As far as the rental rates, yes, the board within the policy sets the fee schedules, sets the facility rates. What we did try to do in our facility fee schedule was condense it because there were multiple categories and lots of confusion, not only internally, but externally as to what group qualified under what plan. And so if it's school related, as we specified in policy, it's not on the fee schedule because there is no fee. So if it's school sponsored or school related, there are no fees. We've clarified that. That's why it's not on the fee schedule.
Our school district.
That's correct. And so when it comes to other uses, we have nonprofits, and those are who meet the IRS regulation for a nonprofit. And then we have for-profit groups. And so the fee schedule is based upon those two groups. We did look at, again, surrounding districts, including Chapel Hill, Durham, Alamance, et cetera, and you saw the comparison with that. So there's not just, I think, the fees we're talking about, it's also the other protocol and requirements, certificates of insurance, making sure that we have safety protocol in place, and making sure we have an appropriate staffing allotment for the rentals. And it is very difficult for us to have individuals who really want to work nights and weekends for facility rentals. And I don't know we want to be in a position of telling a principal that there's an event going on the campus to the community, so they have to be there. Our goal is we run through, we make sure the building and facility is available, the space is available, and then we make sure we have the staffing available for the event, and then we work with the group and the organization. But again, back to the question, the facility rental processes for July 1 started to open up for us accepting applications after March 7th. I don't have the exact day when we opened up the applications. I would be very concerned of any group that pre-booked, prepaid, or pre-scheduled events prior to having approval.
Thank you so much, Patrick. That provides a lot of context. So if we can do one question at a time, Sarah?
Well, I'll just say, I'm supportive of raising our rates overall, especially given the comparison. And I also noticed that you removed the after-hours utility usage fee, which was an additional 20, 25, or 45. So that offsets a bit, like that was already part of the fees before. So they haven't been updated in a long time. You have this comparison. It makes sense to me. I will say the group that came tonight that's been planning on using this school, that is a lot of money to come up with in a short period of time. And so personally, if there are some groups that are planning on using things this summer, I'm okay with sort of a delayed start to the increased fees. I think we have to increase the fees, but I just think all of this coming up so quickly for that group or other groups like it is something that I would want to reconsider.
That's exactly what I was going to say, is maybe what we should do is they came forward and told us we'd bankrupt them. Maybe what we do is we do raise the rates, but we give them an exemption.
Okay, I have thoughts about that. Bonnie and then Hillary?
Yeah, I would be happy to do a delay, but I'd like to also take that time to do a little bit closer look on these fees and the tiering that we're using. And also the additional, when I spoke to Mrs. Mcguire, and she said in addition to the fee, there's also, that didn't include all the additional staff that we were requiring that they have. And give you just some examples. They have always paid for the additional school custodians for their program, so that's never been a question. But I think we're asking them to pay for techs, and they said we have our own techs. So how do we, will we allow substitutes like that? So I think it just needs, and I realize that you're caught in this funky place because the facilities have not been available and they're running this summer. So a delay would be helpful, but I also think we should just take a little bit of closer look to see if we could make sure that the people who are actually paying for the buildings, which are the Orange County taxpayers, and the people who are supporting our students and teachers and families are getting a fair, something that's affordable to them and that works for us. So I'd like to kind of sharpen our pencils a little on it.
I think on the tech fees, I can give you a great example that we're in this building tonight and we're paying technical staff based on the county requirement that our staff not control the technology in this room.
I understand.
And and the reason for that is so that the standards and the equipment remain viable for the building use and for the intended purpose, which was the county meetings and the county schedule. Our school staff, especially our individuals who are in charge of the equipment and have to pay through their funding or through the capital program for us to replace sound equipment, light, staging, et cetera, just ask the same thing, that they be involved in that and they work the events in order to make sure that the equipment is managed correctly.
I think that it would be wise to propose to the commissioners some sort of grant application where organizations that are valuable to our community can request funding from the county level, and then they can pay us because we're already so drastically underfunded for our capital needs, and that would help us offset some costs and a way for them to value these groups also, because it's not that we don't support them, it's that we can't afford to do that. We'd like to, but it's not sustainable over time.
Eva, did you have comments? I was noticing. expressions on your face.
I was a little concerned about the making exceptions one by one as they come to the board proposal.
Yeah.
I think if you want to redefine, I mean, this program is presumably being charged a nonprofit rate, which is lower. Right? Is it?
Correct. I'll go ahead and say it. I mean, one of the issues is we've asked for a breakdown of the actual hours by day so that we could calculate the appropriate fees. And until I get an hourly breakdown by day, I'm using their estimates.
I mean, I just think we have to cover our expenses.
Yes, we
I mean,
do.
So,
Will's sent us.
go ahead, Will.
I mean, I'll just point out, this specific group has been doing this for 12 years. There has never been an issue brought that I'm aware of to the board for anything they've done.
Actually,
And
that's not true.
Well, staff is telling you there's a financial issue.
Yeah.
That, like, we can't continue to sustain hosting group. I mean, this isn't about this particular group. I don't know anything about it. So I don't want it to be misconstrued that I am criticizing this group whatsoever. But I mean, you are hearing that it's not sustainable over time. Like, it's great that we welcome groups into our schools and use them, but it has to be a sustainable system.
I'm not disagreeing. My concern is the group has this planned, all of a sudden they're seeing the $7,000, they don't have the money to do that. And they're asking for some giveaway in this. And we've done this many times on many different things where we've said, yep, we're going to shift this out and let them, know that we are changing this and here's what we're doing. So that's all I'm saying is we should give them some leniency for this program or anybody else that's in this situation for some small period.
I mean, maybe folks who already had reserved this for 6 months, or I don't know.
Yeah, I'm just saying a period. I
that's-
don't care what the
Yeah, I
period
think
is.
that's the idea, right?
Yeah.
That-
Okay, Brenda was
No,
starting
I
to
was
speak,
just,
and then also Dr. Fuller.
Yeah, I just wanted a question. I keep hearing, that, this has happened all of a sudden. This conversation started in March. So it's not, perhaps we just started listening more closely the end of June, when the rubber is meeting the road. But we started this conversation in March. And, we're losing money. I'm not saying, because, I think the Community Players is a fantastic group. I participated, actually. But my point is, we're losing money. And what exactly does the 7,000 cover? That's another thing. I mean, where did Daryl pull that number from? Is it exactly 7,000 for this particular production that we're bankrupting her? And I know that's rhetorical because you don't know.
Okay, and also Dr. Felder wanted to say something, I believe.
Yeah, she did.
So my wondering, Patrick, is around, are there other organizations or groups that fall in the same space that this particular group does? So in terms of needing to start soon and maybe feeling that this came about very quickly for them and they're not prepared. I'm just wondering, are we talking about one group? Is it 10 groups? How many groups are in this situation?
So again, as of March 7th, we had 0 groups approved for any facility usage beyond June 30th, 2022. At that time, we updated our application and we also noted that the policy was under review and that there would be a new fee schedule for July 1, 2022. What we couldn't tell groups is exactly what those costs would be while we were in the review process. So we do not have a long list of individuals because individuals have not been approved. Those that have been approved moving forward are being approved under the guidelines that we've recommended, including, as was mentioned earlier, prepayment of fees to ensure that they're not just booking facilities and then not using the facilities, because the prior practice was you only got billed in the rears after you used the building. So if an organization booked a facility for 18 weeks and used it once, there were 17 weeks the facility was not available to other groups, and they only got billed one time for one use. And so there's been both processes, but also, as was mentioned earlier, between custodial, utility fees, and a host of other fees, is bringing alignment to the actual policy and what the facility charges should be.
And just one other clarifying question. Did I understand you correctly that the fee could actually be less than $7,000? You base that on an estimate.
Correct.
You have not received specific information that you requested that would help you to provide a more definitive
Correct.
number.
On June 15th, following our approval at Policy Committee on June 13th, the first seeing of this that went to the board on June 14th, I reached out to that organization on June 15th and explained the new fee structure and the estimated fees based on the times that they had turned in. But the amount of hours is in question based on the days and times and whether or not they really need the facility from the blocks of time that they mentioned. So what we asked them for was to give us a daily schedule and the actual time so that we would be able to give them a better estimate on the billing.
Thank you.
So could I make a suggestion just as to what your options are at this point?
Thank you.
So I think you have so your first option would be to approve the fee schedule as written. You can always, it can be revised, but it would be in place for July 1st. The July 1st deadline is a local policy. That's a deadline you impose upon yourself. So your second option would be to vote to waive that deadline and continue the current fee structure until August 1st or something. And, you know, so someone could make a motion just to waive the July 1st deadline in order to bring this back. Those are, I think, are the two as I see it. Or I guess your third would be just to approve a different fee schedule or amend it in some way. Yes.
Could we move to approve this fee schedule, but grant a grace period just for the summer? Or something like that to groups? Because, you know, even though we have been talking about this and we knew that the fees were going to go up, but that fact that they were going to like triple, or something, that level of change is just so big. So for the groups that are short-term planning on using the space, could we do a grace period?
Sure. I think you could approve it and say it goes into effect August 1st or whatever you want to say.
But I am not opposed to that, but I also don't want us to end up with like $3,000 of costs that we've covered for any group during the grace period. So I don't know if how that would be feasible for our staff to track and cover expenses. And if it turns out, oh, it only cost us, you know, someone estimated 7,000, but their costs are actually 3,200, or I don't think we shouldn't recoup those costs, because that's my opinion. Right. So
I don't know how to address that, to be honest.
I like Sarah's motion. Yep, okay.
Okay, hold on. I think Bonnie had one more
Yeah,
comment.
I first wanted to comment on this coming all of a sudden, and it came all of a sudden to the public because, you know, to Patrick's point, you know, we weren't renting the facility. We shut down renting the facility, and so we weren't accepting applications. And Mrs. Mcguire, who applied some time ago, you know, just heard from us 2 weeks ago and has a production that's ready to go. So from the public's perspective, it's an all of a sudden thing. It would be my preference to throw, since we're not doing anything this summer, because I am hearing that we probably need to refine the policy and the tiering to be a little bit more precise about the definitions of who's eligible for what rate structure. So I just wonder if we should do a delay, and I would pick October 1st, right, because nothing's happening, but do a delay in policy to October 1st, but also, what I don't want to do is have to start tweaking it. I'm not prepared to approve the policy as it is now for October 1st, so I'd like a chance to look at it more. And we have new members of the board coming on.
And you're saying, okay,
I'm saying October 1st, that we're going to just delay, and the board is going to need to make a decision for October 1st instead of July 1st, but it would give the policy committee a chance to look at the fee structure and the definitions a little bit more closely.
I don't personally agree that we need to look at definitions more closely, but go ahead, Will.
So I just wanted to confirm before we do something. So the players, is their play in July or in August?
It is the July. They have the
Okay.
facility approximately
Okay, so
exclusively
the August 1st.
over 2
It may
weeks.
go into August. It's 2 weeks, right? 2 weeks? Does it go into August?
August 15th.
One
We'll just-
suggestion I would
Yeah,
make
August
is
15th.
think about your delay with the applications that have been received to date
Yes.
and not the 200 I might receive tomorrow.
Yes. Right. As of this point. So if we approve this at this point, this is public knowledge when you are applying, right, tomorrow,
Right.
that these will be the fees.
Right.
So, I mean, I'll make a motion to approve this proposed fee schedule and to grant, for it to go into effect August 15th. So it's sort of most of the summer, but before school starts. No, wait a minute, that's not what we're doing if we're doing the like by effective. No, okay.
For those who have already applied.
And for it to go into effect August 15th, applied to groups that have already applied. Sorry, that sentence was really poor, Eva.
Are you good with it, Eva?
Are you good with
I'm
that?
not, I'm sorry, I didn't
The
follow
applications
it.
we'd already
I would
received.
like the fee schedule to go into effect. And for groups that have already applied prior to approval tonight, if their event occurs prior to August 15th, for them to pay the old fees, which were given the size of the increase here.
I do understand it. Yes.
That's my
Second.
motion.
Motion from Ms. Smiley, a second from Vice Chair Stevens. Anything further before we can vote on this fee schedule? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Okay?
Okay. All right, so that is the fee schedule. And then the policy itself. Brenda, how do we have to do this?
Yeah, that was the issue, wasn't it? The policy. Well, as we do it, I would like to strongly encourage next school year that board members try to Zoom in if you can't attend the policy committee, because it would shorten the meetings a little bit. I know you have to work, you know, but you were there the day of the meeting, but you were there that budget that morning.
I'll move to approve these changes to the policy, and then if the policy committee needs to come back to it next year to look at anything else, we can always do that.
Second.
Okay, a motion from Ms. Smiley, a second from Vice Chair Stevens. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Do we need to waive the second reading of that, or is this the
This is
second
the
reading?
second.
This is the second reading.
Okay, so.
Believe it or
okay,
not,
Very
it's the
good.
second
Okay,
reading.
just making
And all
sure.
this talk.
Okay, Bonnie, are you
No,
voting?
it doesn't matter because we could change it. if we have
Okay,
to.
so
We
he's
can
voting
change
yes.
it.
Okay, great. We are down to one. Oh, no, yeah, we're down to one item. We're down to the SRO contract extension. Oh, and we have Mr. Ablay right here.
Oh, you're here. I mean, of course he is.
Yeah.
He's glued to the
His
floor.
height.
Sarah, you
So,
had questions.
Yes, I had sent some questions in advance. Eva, thank you for bringing some of those thoughts back and explaining that it's in draft form because we also need the attorneys from the sheriff's department to look at it. It sounds like if there was going to be any substantial, meaningful change, that it would come back to our board.
I think that we would have to do that, yes. I think our hope was that perhaps the board would approve, subject to final language adjustments by the two attorneys, but that changes that would be a policy change would come back.
Yep. Okay. And so I would appreciate, you suggested in here that we could clarify the language around where the costs, how it's getting paid for a bit. So I would appreciate that. And changing the word clarify to explain, that the officer, if questioning a student, would explain their role as a law enforcement officer. And I asked about if the law enforcement officer is questioning students, and the students have some rights. And so I would like to request that the contract say that explicitly, not just explaining their role as a law enforcement officer, but like explaining their role as a law enforcement officer and any rights that the student has, or something like that.
I think that might be hard to put in this
Yeah.
MOU. The officers have specific training, of course, on when they need to tell someone their rights.
Okay.
I don't know that we're in a position to suggest that they do it differently from what they are trained.
And required to do, right? So if they have an obligation to, I just want them to, I thought that it would be helpful to state that obligation in that section. Maybe it's something you could go back and talk with the
Kind of like
sheriff's lawyer about it.
You're gonna do it, you might as well say it.
I think we do also have local policies in reference to school officials and questioning students and the presence of law enforcement and the inclusion of parents within those conversations. So I think our policies align, because unless it's a matter that was referenced by the attorney where
Yeah.
there's, the law's already
I think what we
clear.
can control is what our folks are trained to tell them.
Right.
So if it's an administrative investigation, then that we already have a policy that would address
Right.
who and who's involved in the notification of parents, et cetera.
Okay, and the legal expectations around SROs wouldn't change just because it's not stated explicitly.
And I will
Okay.
tell you, Ms. Dubus and I have talked about a specific training, not only with searches, but with, this specifically with our school administrators.
Great.
And then we're working with our SROs separately, but we'll make sure there's very clear understanding of what this means.
Awesome. Okay, and then so the last thing that I had, the other questions that I had, y'all answered. The only other one I had a question about, and just suggested that we might speak with the sheriff about, if other board members are supportive, is the selection of SROs for schools. So in my email, I put this, that, looking at some of the best practices for school and SRO relationships, that this law enforcement bulletin from the FBI suggested, if possible, a school administrator or superintendent should participate in the selection of an officer to place in the school. Research has found that involvement of school personnel during this process increases the effectiveness and acceptance of the officer. So obviously the sheriff has like full control over who he makes a school resource officer, but some sort of involvement of the district in that sort of matching process, if you will.
What's the current process?
The sheriff's department makes that decision on the placement of SROs. And I will tell you, that's my vision on that has changed over my career. When we talk about the legalities of critical incidents that happen on a school campus, having the sheriff's department responsible for the individual they put in the building who is going to react in that situation, I think is critical. Because as a school administrator and as having experience both at the school level and at the district level, I have to trust that that individual they're sending us. However, I will say, as we've done in all of our school districts I've worked in and with our SROs, if there's a concern or a question about incidents or issues, then there's a place for us to be able to raise, is that the right fit of the individual within the school building? But I do think I would just weigh concerns over us involvement in the sheriff's decision on the individuals in the buildings.
I'm not even suggesting necessarily like official involvement as a decision maker, but in some sort of, the same way that you would do it reactively if you have a concern about performance, that almost sort of proactively in the point where you're determining a new school resource officer for a building. I mean, that's what this document from the FBI says it's a best practice. So that's why I was raising it, was, I totally support the sheriff should make the decisions about who's SROs. Is the match for the building piece, is that a place to have a conversation with the principal or the superintendent or the chief of schools or someone about that aspect of it? That was the suggestion, if others are not, and I suggested it as a discussion with the sheriff, not a. Yeah.
And what I'm hearing you say is more not like this specific officer should be in this building, but something more like, here are the needs of this building, and here are the sorts of challenges that are faced in this building. So when you're making that determination, these are the sorts of things you would keep in mind.
Exactly.
I don't, whatever about whether it's in the MOU or not, but I think that's what I'm hearing you say.
Yeah, I was merely putting it out because the FBI says it's a best practice.
And I would just add, I think that if we looked at our track record with the sheriff, we're pretty close to a best practice.
Yes,
FBI might want to come here.
That's
and
right.
see what we're doing.
And I was about to say that. Thank you.
And so,
Well, and it's
and
the
I don't
only
know, do
one
we
of
have
the.
any, have we had
Sorry, I
any
shouldn't be
problems where
interrupting.
we've had to intervene? I mean, they're usually ahead of us. If sheriff's not happy with the way someone's working in a school, they'll pull them out in a second.
Again, I think our SRO program is very strong, and we have very great support with our local law enforcement partners for the program that we have in place.
And I will just say, this is the only best practice I identified that we were not already doing.
And one
which
thing
is why
I
raised
will
it.
say just quickly about the FBI is they're looking at school districts across the United States where they also hire private security, volunteer citizens, local sheriff's department, state. There's an entity of agencies across the spectrum. And so, probably in some other situations, having individuals at the school deciding if that individual is fit to be a school resource officer for the age and the appropriateness of the students they work with may play into that as well.
And if I could
Dr.
just,
Felder, go ahead.
Thank you so much. Just want to remind us that we have a great partnership with regards to the training or professional development for our SROs. That's done in conjunction with district staff. And I have not seen that done before. We actually lead a lot of that training. So from a school perspective, from a district perspective, which has been helpful.
Right.
Yeah.
As we approach 10 o'clock, if we can wrap up, but yeah, I know Bonnie Bridges, we can keep wrapping up. Go ahead, Bonnie.
Has the sheriff seen this? Where,
The sheriff's attorney has it. I don't know.
okay,
what
so this
his
is just our
personal-
draft to them. It's not something that's close to.
Answered, Sarah, you're.
Sure, so I'm not hearing a lot of energy from the board to pursue this best practice, like discuss this
No, I
potential
don't,
best
yeah.
practice.
No,
with
I
the
don't,
student this
I'll
year.
say I don't support that because, and I will say that we will have our fingers on the pulse of what's going on because we're going to have the supervisor of the SROs sitting around this table, so he will know. So that'll, we even have more anyway, I don't support that.
Well, and I think Andre's opinion might be very interesting in the fall or the next time you review it. So y'all should ask him next time because he may have insight into that because, Sheriff Blackwood is very responsive to us and has been a great partner. And that is also an elected position. And so he may not always be in that role. I'm sure he will retire at some point.
Right.
Our board will not always be here. Writing best practices into our policies, to y'all's point about budget hearings, can be good. That's all.
Go ahead, Vice Chair Stevens.
Madam Chair, I move to approve the recommendation as provided by Patrick. Oh, Ms. Apley, sorry.
Second.
Motion from Vice Chair Stevens, a second from Ms. Hauser. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed?
Sorry.
Great. Oh, that's okay. Thank you so much. Now, before we return to closed session, I do need to say that we are going to return out here to open session. So we can't completely shut down yet. Is that correct, Dr. Felder?
That's correct.
Okay.
That's my understanding.
Our toys here.
Did you say toys?
If you said
To
you,
move
yeah,
to go into closed
yes.
session?
Time we need a motion to go into closed session under 143-318.11A to discuss plans for school safety and security.
So moved.
Second.
Motion from Ms. Smiley, a second from Vice Chair Stevens. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Great.
So we'll come back to this spot.
Yes, ma'am.
Well, I just brought my sleeping bag.